starting to play as Batman. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76 Moon Rider. Chu Cheng was still looking forward to the test of Batgirl Cassandra. It's not that he was a lada to control or had any preference for the 3 no attributes. It's just that, although there is a saying that esports don't need love, most players are more willing to see a slim and beautiful girl than to see a big man shaking his butt on the monitor when playing this kind of third-person perspective action game. Switching to Batgirl, Chu Cheng quickly rushed to the second address given by the big brother. The girl in black tights half crouched and landed on the top of the building. The black cape fluttered in the bright moonlight, revealing a different temperament from Batman. Because she is a hero of the same lineage as Batman, and her equipment is also provided by Batman, her operation mode is basically the same as Batman. Pressing the X key can also activate the detective mode. But Chu Cheng suspected that the visual sensor equipped by the master for the little bat was cut corners, or it might be that the hardware update was not as diligent as his own. Because once the detective vision of Batgirl is turned on, it can be seen that its detection range is not as good as Batman's, and the accuracy may be slightly worse, and it also lacks some functions. However, although it is small, it has all the basic functions. Although it is a bit simplified, it still has all the basic functions, mainly wall perspective, night vision function and armed scanning. In addition, Chu Cheng soon discovered that Batgirl did not have a glider. Although she was wearing a cape with the same shape as Batman, it did not seem to be made of the same material. Batman's cape is hard when it is electrified, and her cape is soft, no matter how much electricity it has, so it cannot help her glide like a wing. Cassandra, who has been trained as an ultimate killer since she was sensible, is very proficient in various skills, and her stealth skill points are also full, so she must have no pressure in playing stealth assassination. However, since her specialty is fighting, Chu Cheng will not pretend this time. He will not engage in assassination or sneak attacks, but will directly blow through the ceiling and airborne into the enemy's stronghold, and go up and fight. Soon he also discovered the difference between Cassandra and Batman in the fighting system. First of all, before all enemies attack, the warning signs will appear on their heads earlier than Batman, and they will stay longer, giving players more time to react. In addition, the types of attacks she can counterattack are more comprehensive. Chu Cheng found that the frequency of yellow and red signs appearing on the heads of enemies seemed to have decreased significantly, and they were basically blue signs. Clicking the right button of the mouse, Cassandra will automatically select a move to dismantle and counterattack. This is reasonable. After all, predicting and dismantling moves are Cassandra's specialty. Her specialty is to predict the enemy in advance and break all the moves in the world. This seems a bit like Dugujiujian. Chu Cheng found that even gun attacks are within this category. Although there is a saying that guns are fast and accurate within 7 steps, there are also people who say that you don't have to be faster than the bullet, you just need to be faster than the person holding the gun. Cassandra's ability enables her to read any action from muscles and macro expressions, including pre-reading the gunman's trajectory and shooting intention, so she can even predict bullets. For Chu Cheng, it only takes one right click, and the girl in the picture will likely dodge the trajectory. Of course, it would not be so easy if it was a shotgun or a Gatling gun. However, she could still predict these weapons, but she needed Chu Cheng's operation and more extensive movement to avoid them. Another surprising thing was that Cassandra was the most energy efficient hero among all the heroes he was currently operating. Chu Cheng even felt that with his current physical strength, he could fight Cassandra until dawn and still be energetic. The main reason was that she was really effortless to control. In the stronghold, Chu Cheng felt that it was easy to defeat a lot of strong men alone. He thought about it and felt that it was mainly related to the characteristics of the hero. First of all, she was a girl, and she might not have developed completely. Even compared with male heroes without superpowers, she was definitely lacking in strength. So she relied more on skills rather than brute force. All the movements she was trained The moves she chose and the means of defeating the enemy were more or less considered to avoid brute force and save physical energy. So it was so effortless to control. Of course, the shortcomings were also quite obvious. First of all, she was a girl with insufficient strength, so her attack power was also lacking. Then her equipment is also simplified compared to Batman, with basic darts, smoke bombs and so on, but the variety is far less comprehensive than Batman's. But at least there are powerful output methods like explosive batarangs, which is generally quite top in Chu Cheng's current hero pool. After breaking countless bones and leaving a lot of people with open mouths and closed eyes, the test came to the final stage, and the last one was Moonlight Night. Chu Cheng deliberately left the most important show of the day to Moonlight Night. The security of this address is more strict than the other two places tonight. There are more important big figures in the gang here, and those stationed here are the worst among the criminals, and they are all murderers. And more than half of the criminals here are armed with firearms. Even if there is something wrong, the sheriff's department dare not easily touch this place. But as Chu Cheng said before through Brother Tang, he is not a sheriff. This is a suitable opponent for Moonlight Night. Unlike Batman, Moon Knight did not sneak in or go around. He airdropped directly to the main entrance of the base, kicked the door panel so hard that it dented and deformed, and collapsed with a loud bang. Moon Knight dragged a white cape and walked in with big strides. Two men in black immediately flashed out, pulled out their guns and shot without even looking. The bullets splashed a little ripple on Moon Knight's shroud-like battlesuit, and then there was no response, as if a stone had sunk into the sea. Moon Knight moved forward indifferently, and his arm flicked lightly with the snow-white cape, and several bullets were reflected back from nowhere. The two men in black were immediately shot in the head by the bullets he shot, and fell down with their heads raised. Chu Cheng was still a little surprised at this time. Unexpectedly, he just clicked the right mouse button prompted on the screen, and Moon Knight actually killed the two so casually. But it's not that he has any sympathy for criminals. Most of the criminals in this place deserve to die, not to mention that the other side shot first. However, the hero Chu Cheng currently controls will not easily kill people except for non-human targets. Moon Knight is indeed the first one who can kill two people by pressing the counter-attack button. But it is true. Although Moon Knight is jokingly called Marvel Batman, he is not the real Batman after all. His main personality was a mercenary before he became Moon Knight, so naturally he cannot have any principle of not killing. Moreover, the hero setting of Moon Knight is to work for the moon god Kang Su. And Kang Su is the same as Fa Shu, and his attitude towards evil people is to kill them one by one. Kang Su's thinking may also be simple. I'm the moon god, and the night is my territory. Why do I have to seek the consent of your human judicial system to judge evil people in my own backyard? Of course, he did not seek the consent of his own 9 pillars. The gate was kicked down, and the sentry at the gate was also killed in seconds. Of course, everyone in the stronghold heard the news. The big shots immediately hid in the back, and the other gangsters also prepared for battle and gathered in the hall fully armed. More than a dozen guns were pointed at the main door, which was the only entrance to the hall. The first person pulled the trigger the moment he heard the first noise from outside the door. With the first person taking the lead, all the others opened fire, as if they had received a command. Guns spit out flying fire snakes at the main door. The roar of the gun muzzles was like thunder. Shell casings bounced on the floor with a crackle, and dense bullet holes spread rapidly along the door panels. The firepower coverage lasted for a full minute before stopping. A moment of silence. Boom. 2 devastated door panels were suddenly blown open. Just like being hit by a truck at a speed of more than 60 miles per hour, the huge door panels flew into the hole with a mournful cry, and the 2 unlucky guys were beaten into a meat paste on the wall without even a chance to scream. A pale shadow stood in the dimly lit corridor. The white cloak fell to the floor behind him, and only a pair of eyes on the masked face shone with a bright and mysterious glow like the moon. It's my turn. Chapter 77. The sheep ran away. The afterimage was like a white whirlwind that swept into the hall. Under Chu Cheng's control, Moonlight Knight leaped into the air, and his white cloak opened into a crescent shape behind him. First, there was a flying kick. Chu Cheng could hear the sound of the bones of the person being kicked shattering through the screen. The guy screamed and was blown away dozens of meters away, with half of his body stuck in the wall. Then Moon Knight took off the crescent logo on his chest, and it turned out to be a dart. It was as thin as paper but sharp, reflecting the golden luster under the fluorescent lights in the hall. Moon Knight threw it casually, and the dart bit a gangster's neck like a raptor with its wings spread, causing blood to spurt out. At the same time, Moon Knight jumped in front of another person, raised his hand to catch the dart that was spinning back, and cut the man's neck with a knife. He moved too fast, and a set of combos only took a moment to happen. It was not until this time that the gangsters came to their senses and quickly turned their guns to try to lock him. 3 of them found themselves standing behind Moonlight Knight, and they raised their guns and fired at him, but the dense rain of bullets only made ripples on the snow-white cloak like the surface of a lake under a summer rainstorm. Moonlight Knight turned around calmly, shook his cloak, and countless bullets shot back intact, shooting the 3 people into sieves. The gangsters in the hall, even the most vicious ones, saw this scene and stared in disbelief. What the hell? Did this thing shoot the bullets back? Question mark? Is this playing the Matrix? I don't understand what kind of weird ability this is, but for a moment everyone present felt that the trigger on their finger seemed to weigh tons, and no one had the courage to pull it. Of course, Moonlight Knight would not stop because of their ceasefire. He flashed in front of one of them, and a golden light flashed in his hand. Wherever he went, blood spurted out, and the man also died on the spot. A muscular man over 2 meters tall came forward with a crowbar and smashed the back of Moon Knight's head with all his might. The force was so strong that the legendary holy sword of physics was bent. The man's palm was also in pain from the recoil, and he could hardly hold the crowbar in his hand. But the Moon Knight who took the blow with his head slowly turned around, and his cold eyes under the white mask fell on the muscular man's face. The muscular man felt an extremely dangerous signal in his heart. He took a half step back in a daze, and instinctively hid the bent crowbar in his hand behind his back, revealing an expression of "Brother, I was just joking, don't take it seriously," but it was useless. Moon Knight opened his 5 fingers, and pressed his hand on his chest. The strange power was like a tidal wave. The 2-meter-tall strong man flew far away, as if he had hit a speeding car. He broke through the wall with a bang, leaving a human-shaped outline on the thick wall. The rest of the people were even more stunned. What on earth is this? Question mark? As the saying goes, what people fear most is often the unknown. The kind of thing that can overturn everything you know, and even break the rules you are accustomed to. You can't understand it. You can't resist it. The only thing you can do is sink into the ocean of fear and watch yourself being swallowed up bit by bit. This is exactly what they are facing. At this time, in the eyes of everyone, Moonlight Knight has been upgraded from a madman in strange costumes who has sprung up recently to a ghost-level existence. Chu Cheng now also found that this Moonlight Knight is really a bit fierce, because the power level of Moonlight Knight is linked to the blessing of the Moon God. In the original work, when he is weak, he can't compare with Captain America, and when he is strong, he can even defeat Thor, so he didn't know what level of Moonlight Knight he drew out at first. It seems that the Moon Knight currently in production has the same power as Captain America. Both of them are super soldiers. The most powerful thing is the super self-healing power given by the Moon Goddess armor. Not only can he be fine after being hit by a bullet, but he can also produce anti-armor. He is very strong and can also counter-injure. No wonder the Moon Knight wore this white suit that looked like a target in the middle of the night. It is said that one force can break all laws. People with strength are so confident. They can be unparalleled in the rain of bullets, so they don't have to walk on their knees and steal people in the back row like an old silver coin. A real man should use this eye-catching French military flag color to remind the opponent from a distance, "I'm here, you are finished." Until Chu Cheng saw another button prompt pop up on the screen, saying that pressing the caps key can switch between the main and secondary personalities. Chu Cheng was stunned at the time. What a guy. It is so restored. The Moon Knight also has personality switching. So he pressed the caps key according to the prompt. The image of the Moon Knight in the field suddenly changed. The gorgeous cloak disappeared in an instant, and the snow white armor also became invisible. Instead, it was KFC Grandpa. The gangsters in the room were also stunned. The last second, they were facing an incomprehensible incarnation of fear, an invincible white god of death. As a result, the style suddenly changed in a second. The opposite side suddenly became a white suit that looked like the KFC grandpa, with a silly headgear on his head. Some people say that at least 20% of the beauty of this hero uniform comes from the cape. This is not necessarily true, but it has its own reasons. Because the Moonlight Knight's cape is removed, and only a white headgear is left, it feels like a pervert wearing white stockings on his head. Especially if you look closely, you will find that there is a crescent mark on the forehead of the headgear, which symbolizes the identity of the Moonlight Knight. If you don't know, you might think he is costing Mr. Bayo. The flawless white shape of the white silk headgear is like riding on his face, to mock Mr. Bayo's face, that must look like the bottom of a pot. This is the second personality of Moonlight Knight, Stephen Grant. After the personality switch, Chu Cheng did not stop the operation, and continued to press the attack button. Moon Knight, who changed into a white suit, flashed forward, raised his hand as fast as lightning, and swung a stick at the face of the person in front of him, which immediately made the man's brain buzz and fall to the ground. After switching personalities, not only the uniform, but also the weapon was changed. Moon Knight and Stephen's personality no longer use deadly darts, but 2 sticks. Stephen Grant is the good man in Moon Knight's personality. He basically has most of the characteristics of the American comic saint, among which the most prominent one is that he does not kill people. So Chu Cheng soon discovered that Moon Knight in this form also has the same passive as Batman. Unlike the previous form, when operating this Moon Knight, he can boldly combo and rub skills. Anyway, it is impossible to die. Don't ask, just fall asleep. Similarly, the ability of Moon Knight in this form is also weaker. I don't know whether it is because he deliberately held back, or it was like this. When operating, Chu Cheng can clearly feel that his strength and physical fitness have declined in all aspects. Moreover, the fighting skills of the second personality, who is a part-time worker, have also significantly declined compared to before. In battle, he basically relies on Moon Knight's physical strength to crush him. Although this personality may be an indispensable part of Moon Knight's conscience, his actual combat role gives people the feeling that he is a weight brought in to enrich the fun of the game, because the game is too simple. Chu Cheng tried to press the personality switch button again, and the image of Moon Knight changed again. This time the shape is more similar to the original main personality, but there are also differences. Moon Knight in this form looks more gloomy, and his entire face under the white hood is completely covered in shadows, which also makes him look more weird and powerful. This is Moon Knight's third personality, Jack Lockley. It is generally considered to be the most violent, cruel, and powerful personality of Moon Knight. Chu Cheng also discovered this soon. The power of Moon Knight in this form is much stronger than the original, and the combo style has become more rough and barbaric. If the main personality of Moon Knight is just not afraid to use fatal killing moves, then the third personality of Moon Knight has almost no restrictions on the choice of moves. What with broken limbs, shattered bones, heart-wrenching, and twisted necks, Chu Cheng only clicked a few times on the mouse and the other side died in a more miserable state than the other, and the hole was instantly filled with blood. Chu Cheng quickly figured out the difference between the 3 forms. The main personality is a relatively balanced form. The second personality is the weakest, and has a principle of not killing, but it is relatively the most energy saving among the 3 forms of Moonlight Knight, and is suitable for ordinary enemies who are not guilty of death. The third personality is the trump card, which consumes the most energy, and is the strongest, but it needs to be used with caution. Because his moves are brutal and his attacks are killing moves, and this is something that Chu Cheng, as the operator, cannot control. He just moves his fingers and taps the mouse a few times and the opponent is gone. It's a bit scary to think about it. Now that the team has the only designated police dog, Lawyer Ma, Chu Cheng feels like he has found the code to wealth. Now he finds that wandering around the streets in the middle of the night waiting for a lucky guy to refresh is really inefficient, so it's better to take the initiative. So the next few consecutive nights were nightmares for the gangs in this area. For example, the club boss who was approached by Green Arrow at the beginning, he felt like he was having a hell of a time these few days. On Monday night, a cuckolded Robin Hood suddenly appeared from nowhere. came in without saying a word, and beat them up. After the beating, he threatened to come again tomorrow. As a result, this guy really kept his word and came back the next day. Although the boss had prepared in advance that day and specifically asked for weapons and was on high alert, it was useless. They still ended up in the same situation. The people he asked for this time were meaningless except for giving the opponent more experience and points. As a result, Chu Cheng was even more satisfied when the experience points increased. Before leaving, he gave a thumbs up, saying that the service was very good and the child was satisfied and would come again next time. So on Wednesday, they ran into Cassandra, a humanoid self-propelled predictive bat lolly, and were beaten black and blue again. On Thursday, the boss gritted his teeth and decided to take a step back. If I can't afford to offend, can't I hide? I don't want this broken stronghold anymore. With a wave of his hand, he led all his subordinates to evacuate and hide in a new place. However, Chu Cheng had already calculated this. When Chu Cheng controlled Green Arrow, he left trackers on him and his car and chased him like a ghost in the middle of the night. And this time he didn't use Sugar Brother or Lalita, but the god-killing Moonlight Knight. Big Brother and his subordinates were all beaten up by Moonlight Knight again. Of course, he didn't switch to the third personality. Although the main personality Moonlight Knight also killed people, unlike the third personality whose attack must be fatal, the main personality can avoid killing under the intentional control of the player. The same group of people in the same base have been fleecing for several days, and they have also practiced the operation of the new hero, and earned points and made money, which was very enjoyable. The only thing Chu Cheng was careless about was that he caught a sheep and fleeced it every day, and the sheep was fleeced like a bald man, and the sheep ran away. On Friday morning, my brother showed up at the sheriff's office in person. He was still leaning on crutches and wearing a cast when he arrived at the door. The sheriff on duty at the sheriff's office was shocked. This brother is a big shot in the area. He doesn't have a good reputation and is on the sheriff's office's blacklist. When such a person comes to the sheriff's office, their first reaction is that he is here to steal. But what's the point of this crutches and plaster? A pig hits a tree, and you hit a pig? But before the sheriffs could speak, the brother tremblingly took out a small black book and said, "Comrade Sheriff, this little book summarizes all the evidence of my crimes over the years, from smuggling and arson to stealing the old man's crutches and deflation of the old woman's wheelchair tires. I have done all kinds of evil. Please make up any crime for me, and convict me, and put me in. It's too scary outside. I don't want to come out in this life." Chapter 78. Send a snack. Chu Cheng got up early in the morning and brushed his teeth while casually checking the news on his phone. He saw a gang leader go to the Public Security Bureau to provide evidence and surrender himself. It was said that he cried bitterly and begged for a severe sentence, preferably life imprisonment, so that he would not have to find a way out after he was released. Even Chu Cheng, the instigator, was dumbfounded when he saw this. It's okay to go to jail directly with evidence. Chu Cheng had thought about whether he would force people to run away by brushing experience every day, but at best, Chu Cheng only thought that the other party might slip away to other cities to keep a low profile. He was originally thinking about tracking and locating these people, and when they ran away to other cities, he would find an opportunity to drive a bat fighter to visit them. When the big brother settles down in another place, he will be hugged by his friends, eating hot pot and singing with his brothers and sisters. Suddenly, the lights will be dimmed, and a 1.8 meter tall bat will fall from the sky, and we will fast forward to Batman is still chasing me. These days, Chu Cheng has been working on the expansion of the security territory. After all superheroes hang around in Jiangdu all day long. Although it is unlikely that anyone can think of someone controlling them, he still tried to let Batman hang around in other cities for precautionary reasons. Practice has proved that the heroes he controls can also move in other cities. However, only Batman has a long-distance flying vehicle, and other superheroes do not have the ability to quickly travel to and from other cities. He really didn't expect this person to escape directly from prison. As long as I surrender quickly enough, Batman will not have time to gank. He really understands the French tactics. Although for Batman, the difference between prison and bus may be that one is free and the other is charged, it is not impossible to go in and beat someone up if he really wants to. It's just that this guy has no hostile judgment after entering the prison. It's time consuming and laborious to beat him up, and it's useless. But it doesn't matter. Now Chu Cheng is casting a wide net. The criminals in the whole city and even the outer city are his walking experience packs. After running away from one, there are still so many left, so he doesn't feel bad at all. During the day, he takes a breath to recover his energy while going to class to change his mood. On the way, he also checks the app of the Special Service 9 Division to see if there is any new news. He has been working as a clerk in the 9th Division for more than half a month. Only yesterday did he receive a message saying that there seems to be news, and it was a gossip from Tangley. Chu Cheng guessed that it might be because he was said before that he didn't have to report to the school for nothing. He didn't sit in the office or go out to work, and he had a salary of 5 insurances and 1 fund with a regular salary. He can't say that he has never heard of such a job in his previous life, but it is generally not available to ordinary people. He thought before that there might not be many such positions in the Special Service 9 Division. It's just that there's a saying that it's a problem to not slack off at work. Anyway, he started working this month and his salary was paid. It's a good thing to take a paid shit. He's not in a hurry to start work. Unexpectedly, his position is almost arranged now. Tangley also said that it should be online chores, organizing materials, doing some file classification or online statistics. After checking the job information for a long time, there was no unexpected message. Mother is coming tonight. This sudden change made Chu Cheng a little surprised. Since I don't know when, every time his mother comes, he has to make full preparations in advance. For example, he locked the study materials in the hard drive and hid the naked little man in the cabinet. But as the saying goes, a wise man can make mistakes. Just like Nobita's 0-point test paper can't escape the fate of being discovered, even if he dug a grave and buried it, Chu Cheng has occasionally had the experience of his mother seeing strange pillows or tutoring materials. So if possible, he doesn't really want his mother to see his room, but of course it's just a thought. In the evening, Mother Huang Liping had already arrived at the apartment. She was shocked the moment she entered the door, and she couldn't help but take a breath. It's a pity that it was not the exclamation of "my son has the appearance of an emperor," but how can it be so messy? Chu Cheng frowned and wanted to say that I was not sloppy, but the things were placed like this, but the dirty clothes thrown in the laundry basket that had not been put into the water and were fermenting were just like a slap on his face. After trying every means to dissuade his mother to no avail, Chu Cheng had no choice but to join her in the project of cleaning the house. Mom, put the headphones on the table. I use them every day. You can put away the ones I can't find on the table. Hey, put the box there too. Don't move it. There are computer accessories in it that are also useful. At first, he made a few excuses for his disorderly placement in his mother's eyes, but soon shut up. Chu Cheng knew that in fact, his mother might also know in her heart that it didn't make much sense for her to clean up the house so neatly. At most, in 2 days, the things will go back to their respective places, and the apartment will remain the same. She knows, but she doesn't care. The temperature will drop in a few days, so remember to put on more clothes. I've also taken out the thick quilt and put it on the top of the cabinet for you. And your closet is a mess, with all kinds of things. I've sorted them by season for you. This side is for autumn, and this side is for winter. Remember to take a look, and don't throw them around next time. Huang Liping said patiently, and her hands never stopped moving. Chu Cheng didn't say anything, but just kept responding. People grow up, and so do everyone in any world. We leave our hometown and familiar environment to face everything unknown. Maybe some people will become successful, maybe some people will become respected masters, and some people may even wear a cloak and underwear outside to save the earth 8 or 10 times a week. But no matter how many years have passed in front of our mothers, we are always just children who need love and care. Huang Liping kept talking. She talked about Chu Cheng's cousin's wife, his uncle who was hospitalized for illness, and his father who was unreasonable at home and made a mess of the house. When she asked Chu Cheng how he was doing, Chu Cheng just smiled and said that everything was fine. He basically went to class, slacked off, and took paid shits. After night, he drove a superhero to beat people up to relieve stress. What's wrong with that? If you have to say something, it's probably that the people who were beaten were pretty bad. Why is your laundry detergent gone? Huang Liping shook the empty bottle of laundry detergent. I was planning to buy some these 2 days. Go quickly when you remember, or you'll forget it later. The street directly opposite the apartment is the business district, and there is a department store in the mall. In fact, it only takes 10 minutes to go shopping, including going up and down the stairs. But every time he thought about buying it on the way home next time, he would forget it every time he came back. It was not until this time that he was urged by his mother that he slowly went out to buy laundry detergent. Walking into the business district, Chu Cheng stopped when he passed by a milk tea shop on the second floor. He was surprised to find that there seemed to be no one here today. This situation would not happen in the past. This is an internet celebrity store. There are long queues in chain stores all over the city all day long. Even in relatively quiet places, you don't have to think about waiting for at least half an hour. Chu Cheng was quite puzzled by this behavior of queuing for a cup of milk tea. For a otaku, it is better to go back and play more games. So even though it is just opposite his home, he has never tried it once. Seeing that it seems rare that there is no need to queue at this time, he also thought that, since everyone is here, he can also take a cup back to his mother to try. So he walked in. "Hello, what can I do for you?" The waiter's attitude was very good, smiling all the time, and his tone was sweet and even a little greasy. Chu Cheng chose 2 recommended by netizens from the comments and ordered a cup of each. "Okay, this is your receipt. Please take it." The waiter tore off the printed receipt and handed it to Chu Cheng. When their fingers intertwined, Chu Cheng noticed that her hand felt unnaturally cold. "We have an event this week. Order any milk tea and get a snack for free." The waiter smiled and took out a small box with exquisite packaging and placed it on the counter. But somehow, the exquisite box made Chu Cheng feel a little weird and uneasy. He opened the lid of the box and froze the moment he saw the things on the plate. What lay inside was like a tentacle that seemed to be covered with blood and ink and was still wriggling. Chapter 79 Red Clothes. Chu Cheng was stunned when he opened the lid of the box. This weird thing that twisted and turned around felt like a vibrator in his mouth. Could he really put it in his mouth? But the waitress seemed to be acting very normal. She went back to the counter as if nothing had happened and prepared the 2 cups of milk tea ordered by Chu Cheng with her colleague. She was now placing a shaker under the faucet of the thermos bucket and turned on the faucet. Chu Cheng clearly saw that what fell into the transparent shaker through the faucet was not tea or water, but a liquid that was as sticky as the tentacle, like a mixture of blood and ink. The thing fell into the pot and condensed into a paste. Chu Cheng could smell the bloody stench from behind the counter. But the waitress had a calm expression and shook the shaker in her hand, as if to shake it evenly. Chu Cheng turned his head immediately. Now of course he had probably guessed what had happened. I'm afraid it was infected. Chu Cheng was not 100% sure that what he saw was correct. If there is anything that the various experiences of traveling through time and space and joining the Special Service Division 9 taught him, it is that what you see is not necessarily true. So he naturally considered the possibility that what he saw was an illusion. But the probability is not high. He is an absolute special person, and the source of infection should have no effect on him. In any case, it is definitely right to leave here first. But it doesn't look easy. He got up and took a few steps, and a smiling waiter stopped in front of him. She also had a smile on her face, standard and friendly, like a spring breeze, but now it seems a bit chilling. Of course, apart from the uneasiness brought by this strange experience, Chu Cheng is actually not that nervous. After all, he is no longer the pure game otaku before. Not to mention that his physical fitness has improved by leaps and bounds after playing games for so many days, and with the equipment of fighting skills and super strength, he is now not compared with the shield rack without the horse gird cover. At least it is not an exaggeration to give him the name of Jiangdu Zaowake. With the power of super soldiers and master level fighting skills, ordinary infected people really have nothing to fear. Not to mention going out to cause trouble. At least self-protection should be no problem. Sorry, sir, the milk tea is almost ready. I have to go buy something else. Chu Cheng said, I'll be back soon. If it is possible to avoid fighting, Chu Cheng still prefers to try to get away and then go back to put on a vest and come back to settle the bill. Chu Cheng noticed that, while the waiter was talking, the other people in the store also stood up, in a uniform manner, as if they had rehearsed. Everyone looked at them blankly, and every pair of eyes was empty, but they seemed to be filled with something else. Chu Cheng felt a slight chill on his back. He remembered that he seemed to have seen similar scenes in Doctor Who, but of course it was far less exciting than experiencing it in person. Although it was remotely controlled through the computer screen. After all, he had experienced so many actual combat experiences, and had practiced some. Chu Cheng had more than one breakthrough route in his mind in an instant. Captain America's strength and fighting skills are all in good condition. Chu Cheng is confident that he can knock them all down in one go. But considering that there may be witnesses and surveillance, he prefers to run away. If he is fast enough, he only needs to knock down 2 targets at least, and break the window glass, to get away as quickly as possible. If he is lucky, he can basically avoid direct confrontation with the infected, and even if the surveillance is retrieved by the 9th Department afterwards, he should be able to deal with it. But at the same moment, snap, the lights went out. The sudden darkness surprised Chu Cheng. Usually he turned off other people's lights, and there were not many chances of being turned down in reverse. The next moment, the light flickered. With the help of the light, that may have only lasted for a few tenths of a second, Chu Cheng saw a figure standing at the door. From the brief flicker of light, Chu Cheng saw that it seemed to be a woman. She had fair skin, but half of her face was covered by delicate black hair, which made her look a little gloomy and weird. She was wearing a red coat, and the dull color seemed to be stained with blood. Chu Cheng noticed that the infected people surrounding him all looked towards the door. In a split second, the lights went out again. When they flashed again, there was no one at the door. The lights came on again, and even Chu Cheng's pupils shrank at this moment. The woman was already in his face. No one knew how she got from the door. In the brief moment, when the lights went out and came on again, the woman in red suddenly appeared in front of Chu Cheng, as if she had teleported. He instinctively took 2 steps back and clenched his fists, but then he realized that this was a little different from the routine in ghost movies. In ghost movies, when a female ghost suddenly appears and gets close to someone's face, she should put her face in front of the camera, but this female ghost was different. She actually turned her butt towards him. That's right, she was standing with her back to Chu Cheng, facing the waiter who was originally blocking his way. The lights went out. There was a muffled sound, which sounded like the sound of a blunt object hitting someone. The lights came on again, and the smiling waiter flew through the air, smashing a table to pieces. The woman in red still stood in front of Chu Cheng, looking as if she hadn't moved at all. It was a bit weird to say this, but Chu Cheng suddenly felt that the terrifying and bizarre crimson back looked a bit majestic, and even gave people a strange sense of security. The other infected people also moved. They kept their mechanical and dull expressions, but they all surrounded them. The woman in red also moved, but her movement was not like that of an ordinary person walking, but more like floating away. Her skirt rose and fell gently with the movement of her body. Her figure was so light that it seemed weightless. Her movements were gentle and graceful, but with a casual blow, an infected person flew out in response. At first glance, the movement did not look like a fight, but rather like a dance, a bloody dance. The long black hair rose and fell with the dance, almost covering the gloomy and pale face throughout the whole process. What was even more weird was that Chu Cheng felt as if she was actually protecting herself. Even he found it absurd to say this, but it did look like that. She controlled her movements intentionally, dancing only around Chu Cheng. Her priority targets were all infected people who might get close to Chu Cheng and pose a threat to him. This made people even more confused. What does this mean? It can't be that the lethality of this middle-aged and elderly woman idol has increased to the point where it is also effective against female ghosts. The battle lasted very short time, and soon the infected people in the room were lying all over the floor. The woman dragged her blood-red body, seemed to glance at Chu Cheng sideways, and then retreated to the side. Then Chu Cheng noticed that another figure had appeared at the door at some point. A girl with a delicate appearance, a small and cute figure, was standing at the door and tilted her head to look at him. Chapter 80, Stand-in Phantom. Sorry, ma'am, but there was an emergency here just now. We are still cleaning up the scene. You can't come in now. My son is inside. Huang Liping ignored the two special service staff members who tried to stop her. Get out of the way. I have to. Mom, it's okay. I'm here. Chu Cheng walked out through the blockade. He took out his phone and showed that to the electronic ID in the Special Service 9th Division app. The two immediately saluted him and then stepped back. Huang Liping immediately rushed over and hugged her son. Are you okay? Are you hurt? If you were, I shouldn't have called you out. I shouldn't have. It's okay, Mom. Look, I'm fine. Don't worry. Nothing happened. It was just a small accident. It was indeed just a small accident for Chu Cheng, but it was not common. Although it seemed to be an infection with a low risk factor, the infection itself was not often encountered. Even now that the source of the infection has been made public, 99% of people can only learn about the relevant incidents through news reports, and there is no intersection with their real lives. Chu Cheng had encountered a small infection incident at the university he attended before, and it wasn't long after that he encountered it again. What does it mean to encounter 2 infection incidents in a row in real life? It feels like there are only 7 level 5s in the Academy City with a permanent population of 2.3 million, and a group of unlucky people can run into 2 of them one after another. If dragged to Africa, this kind of luck can directly become a chief. While Chu Cheng hugged his mother to comfort her, he soon realized that someone seemed to be looking at him. Following that feeling, he soon met the sight of the girl standing not far away. It was the girl who just appeared at the door of the milk tea shop. She was wearing a cute white dress and had a pair of big light blue eyes. Those eyes were looking at Chu Cheng's direction without blinking at this moment, and suddenly met his sight. Then the girl smiled at him. At this moment, Chu Cheng had roughly understood what happened just now. The girl's name was Fanna, who was considered his colleague and an agent of the Special Service 9th Division. But unlike him, who is a paid shit dollar who has nothing on the surface, she is a serious field agent at a young age, and now she has abilities that most agents do not have. That ability also makes her the most special field agent in the current Special Service Section 9. Because just a few days ago, she just became the first person in the Section 9 who can split and freely control her phantom. The phantom is a theory proposed by Professor Miyazaki a long time ago. After the infection level exceeds 100%, some special people may have part of their spiritual body separated from the body and transformed into some independent individuals. The incident of Agent Luo Yajin shows that the phantom may be bred from the deepest darkness in the heart of the special person. It may have independent consciousness, may be out of the control of the main body, and even may attack the main body. But Fanna, who separated the phantom shortly afterwards, proved that the phantom is not necessarily uncontrollable. The woman in red who just appeared in the store is her phantom. Unlike Agent Luo Yajin, Fanna's phantom feels like a remote-controlled thug. The image formed by the condensation of spiritual energy has a power beyond that of ordinary people. It can attack or defend on behalf of the main body and can even use specific special abilities. This discovery immediately made Fanna, who was originally a little transparent person at the same level as Chu Cheng in the organization, become very important. It is said that she was shopping alone today and happened to pass by nearby. She followed the smell of the infected person and ran into Chu Cheng by chance. The 9 agents who were following her in plain clothes nearby also reported to the headquarters as soon as possible, and soon agents rushed to seal off the scene. Chu Cheng understood it. No wonder the teammates came so quickly today. It was only 2 or 3 minutes after the incident that someone rushed to clean up the scene. The image of this special service lunatic asylum in his mind has plummeted from the high profile at the beginning. This organization really gives people the feeling of the Snake Shield Bureau and the shed next door, or a bit like the national football team in the previous life. The common point is that you can't live without this thing, and the monthly bill expenditure figures can make people's hearts and lungs stop, but when you look at the record of 0 to 5, it's useless. It was not until today, when he saw Fana and her red-dressed phantom, that Chu Cheng's impression of the asylum changed slightly. He felt that he seemed to have at least some fighting power. Maybe he didn't have it before, but at least he has it now. After the organization took over, the order given to Chu Cheng was to go back and rest, and the matter would be handled by the specialist. His position would be arranged in the next 2 days, and he just needed to focus on his own work. Chu Cheng had no objection to this. After saying hello to the person in charge on the scene, he took his mother home first. Or rather, he felt that this was the most reasonable way. This was more reasonable. This kind of investigation that was obviously wrong should be thrown to professional investigators. What was there for a 3-0 rookie like him to join in the fun? It would be abstract to ask him to go out and investigate. It felt a bit like the Ukrainian army kicking the doors of internet cafes one by one, arresting all those nerds who were playing CS and COD, giving them guns to join the army, and go to the front line to fight the Russians. It was so fucking outrageous. Huang Liping went to bed early at night. Mother has always had the habit of going to bed early. Usually around 9 o'clock she goes to bed to rest. This is good. After that, Chu Cheng has time to do his own things. After his mother went to bed, he immediately closed the door, put on headphones, and turned on the computer. After a series of loading interfaces, Batman, who was set as the initial character, appeared on the screen. Although this is not something that a newbie can get involved in, it sounds like Batman's job. Usually, Chu Cheng has always been in the fountain to remotely control the humanoid mecha to find trouble everywhere, but this time an infected person actually came to his door. Whether it is out of the professional quality of a superhero or the obsession of gamers with experience packs, it is impossible to let things go like this. He must first find out what the source of infection is, and ensure that similar things will not happen across from his house again. He does not know, and does not understand detective skills such as investigation and reasoning, but it doesn't matter, Batman knows it. When operating Batman, the game thoughtfully prepares a set of foolproof detective processes for players. Although as a game, there are definitely limitations compared to the real world's strongest detective in person, it can be more or less helpful. At this moment, the special agent in charge of the investigation of the 9th Division was still investigating in the milk tea shop. Before they left, Chu Cheng couldn't operate Batman to sneak in to investigate the scene. But it didn't matter. The progress of the special agent's investigation would be synchronized to the 9th Division system in real time, so that the superiors could check it at any time. This also provided convenience for Chu Cheng, because after operating Batman to enter the asylum system last time, the system had already changed into his shape. In layman's terms, the master left a backdoor for people. So if the 9th Division of the Special Service is compared to a bus, then Chu Cheng is now equivalent to a VIP with an annual card. He doesn't even need to buy a ticket. He can enter and exit as he pleases. Chapter 81 Silent Evidence. There is a saying that the first time is strange, the second time is familiar, and the third time is comfortable. The first time you enter, there may be a lot of resistance, but the second time is much smoother. This is the truth of this hacker. With the backdoor left last time, it is not so difficult to enter the system of the lunatic asylum this time, and there is no need to remotely control the master to go all the way to the human server to do it. Chu Cheng quickly found the relevant background of this incident by directly accessing the portable computer with screen projection on the master's gloves. The agent in charge of the incident is still investigating, but it has been preliminarily determined that the incident should be a vector infection, and the means of infection is through the tentacles in the disgusting weird milk tea that Chu Cheng saw in the milk tea shop. But this time the infection type cannot be transmitted in a similar way to air transmission, but must be taken orally by the target to be infected. So it is estimated that the tentacle snacks they provide, or the cup of evil liquid, should be swallowed to be effective. Chu Cheng was a little confused when he saw this, because although everyone's taste is as strange as the XP system, there are also some people with strange hobbies. No matter how he looked at it, He felt that the twitching tentacles and the foul-smelling liquid were not swallowable at all, which made him deeply doubt whether anyone would really fall for the source of infection. But then he thought again. He had seen quite a few infected people in the store tonight. So this made Chu Cheng begin to have a certain degree of doubt about the preferences of modern people for food choices after the XP system. But he soon saw the supplementary explanation. That is, although the tentacles and the sticky liquid may only make the sanity value drop wildly in their true appearance, in the eyes of the deceived target, they can be extremely tempting delicacies. It feels like Grandma Kao used the head-changing method to trick people into meeting offline, and when they got to the room after the meeting, they found that the door of the appointment was a tank that had been welded shut. He had no choice but to press the F key with humiliation and pain. So if this incident gives people any inspiration, it is that what you hear is false, and what you see is not necessarily true. Sometimes what you think is fresh mutton may have curled up, and what you think is a country road may also be a toll highway. The source of infection is still under investigation. The confirmed infected people are basically the staff and customers that Chu Cheng encountered in the store, and the source of infection is still being investigated. Another point worth noting is that the owner of the milk tea shop disappeared a few days ago. The Public Security Bureau received a report and sent a sheriff to investigate, but there seems to be no progress at present. This incident might have been just an ordinary missing case, and it had nothing to do with their 9th bureau. But combined with the infection incident that occurred in the milk tea shop, this missing case suddenly became intriguing. The detective in charge of the 9th Bureau also put the missing case investigation on the itinerary. After their investigation of the milk tea shop, the next stop was the owner's residence. So Chu Cheng decided to go to that address before them. Batman acted quickly. The Black Bat passed silently through the night, flew over the city, and came to the locked block. The owner of the milk tea shop is named Yoshimura and lives in a townhouse. The area is not large, only about 60 square meters. The detective mode scan quickly figured out the structure of the entire building, and it was indeed reflected that there was no one inside. Ordinary pin locks are almost useless in front of Batman. Batman easily pried open the door and walked into the house on the soft carpet. The police department reported that this was where the Yoshimura couple lived. The last time they were seen was by a neighbor. When they returned home that night, they happened to meet a neighbor who went downstairs to throw away the garbage. The neighbor said very confidently that he saw them enter the house. Then the couple did not go to work the next day. No one knows what happened after they returned home that night, but they disappeared after that night. It may be because too many days had passed. Unlike the last time we tracked Agent Luo within a day, there were many clues and traces that could be scanned. Many traces may be faded by time or covered by more new traces. So the longer the interval, the fewer traces that can be scanned. But Batman still found something in this house. Of course, to be more precise, it was Batman's discovery. Because in the detective mode, the suspicious traces or objects that Batman saw were marked with eye-catching colors. As a player, Chu Cheng just had to follow the master's guidance. So for him, it was more like playing a variant of Spot the Difference than a detective game. He had to find the traces and objects marked by the master in the scene, and try to connect them, and think about what they meant. The first trace that was noticed was in the kitchen sink. The edge of the sink drain was marked by the detective mode with an inconspicuous orange-red trace, which was scattered around the drain like fluorescence, looking like a few drops of orange juice splashed out. Chu Cheng entered the detective mode, and held down the space bar to scan. Soon the Bat computer fed back the comparison results. This was a similar reaction to the tentacles and viscous liquid in the milk tea shop. Perhaps something similar had been placed in this sink, or perhaps a similar liquid had been poured out of this drain. At least this was enough to prove that a similar infection medium had indeed appeared in this home. Combined with the characteristics of the medium in the milk tea shop and the reaction of the infected medium appearing in the kitchen sink, it is very likely that someone used the infected medium as an ingredient when cooking. There is a high probability that both of them have become infected, but this does not explain why they disappeared, nor where they went. Chu Cheng ended the scan and exited the first-person perspective, continuing to observe in detective mode. The empty house seemed to be silently telling a horror story, and the cold wind at night made the windows creak. Batman opened the cupboard, and an object marked in orange appeared in the cold tone screen in detective mode. Chu Cheng controlled Batman to pick up the object and looked at it. It was a very small cup, but it looked like an ordinary cup with a very cute and cartoon pattern on it, which might be used by children. But it looked like an ordinary children's porcelain cup, and there was nothing worth noting. Then he seemed to suddenly realize something. The information showed that only the Yoshimura couple lived in this house, and it was clearly written that they had no children. But this cup clearly looked like it was used by children. The reason why this cup was marked in detective mode shows that it made Batman suspicious. Of course, a child-sized cup by itself doesn't mean anything, and no one stipulates that adults can't use this kind of cup. But if combined with other clues, perhaps it can explain the problem. For example, under the same detective mode mark, Batman found 2 adult toothbrushes and 1 child's toothbrush next to the sink. For example, there are also bowls commonly used for eating, a large bowl with a medium-sized bowl inside, and a children's bowl with cartoon patterns on the innermost, and so on and so forth. It's as if this house is silently telling him that there is not only a couple living here, but also a child, an unidentified child. Chu Cheng re-entered the first-person scanning mode. Batman can try to extract DNA data from bowls, cups, toothbrushes and commonly used combs. The Bat computer can call the database of the Special Service 9th Division. If the database has corresponding DNA data, the identity of the child can be locked by comparing it with the Bat computer. But just as Chu Cheng was about to start scanning, the picture suddenly popped up automatically from the first-person perspective. A sound like a blunt object hitting someone came from the side of the house, and a burly figure broke through the wall, with a dangerous bright red exclamation mark on his head, and pounds towards Batman with his fangs and claws bared. It will be available at midnight tomorrow night. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82 Remarks on the Release. Yes, that's right. It's not an update, it's a comment on the release. Please be gentle. On August 1st, which is about 0:05 tonight, this book will be officially released. 5 chapters will be updated first, and then tomorrow will resume the normal update time, still at noon. This book is first released on Kidian. No matter what website or channel you see these, I sincerely hope that you can come to Kidian Chinese website /Kidian Reading app to subscribe and support. Thank you very much. Of course, the author who subscribes to Questions Reading can also receive it, but it may not be counted when the book is ranked as the recommended resource on the main site later. So readers who have the condition should still come to Kidian main site to subscribe and support. Of course, it doesn't matter if it's not convenient. I'm also very grateful to the readers who subscribe to Questions Reading. Your support is also very important. Thank you in advance. Time flies, and it's the day of release again in a blink of an eye. At this special moment, the author is also full of emotion, thinking back to the last time it was released. First of all, as usual, of course, I would like to thank the friends who support this book. Every vote and every click of yours is of great significance to this book. I'm especially grateful to the old book friends who have been following me till now. Every time I check the backstage, I can see some familiar old IDs, which is really touching. In addition, I also need to thank the editor-in-chief of Group 9, Green Bean, and the editor-in-charge, Good Luck. From the time I selected the topic to the time I started planning, Big Bean kept discussing and giving me suggestions. Without exaggerating or blackening, Big Bean is really the most considerate editor I have ever met in my writing career. Editor-in-charge Good Luck will tell me the data trends, the park situation of the new book period and the subsequent recommendation arrangements every week without getting tired of it. He is one of the most responsible editors I have ever seen. Thank you very much. To be honest, it is indeed a bit difficult to put it on the shelves. It is well known that there are many big guys and gods who put it on the shelves at midnight on the 1st. After all, I'm just a newbie, and I don't have the power like them. I tremble under the cheese sandwiched between the two big gods. I dare not think about competing for the list, but at least I hope that I will not be killed too ugly by the big guys. So no matter what, at least lend me the power of the first order please, Neil. It is certain that it will be a hit when it is put on the shelves. First of all, I will post 5 chapters tonight, and 2 more chapters at noon tomorrow. Then, according to the statistics of the first subscriptions as of midnight tomorrow night, the author will continue to work hard on the manuscripts and try to add them all at once. Mainly, the book friends who followed my Dual City all know that at that time, the author was very hardworking and wrote 10,000 words a day until one day he was in a dark duel with someone and was defeated because of carelessness. From then on, he was no longer as brave as he used to be. Okay, this is a joke. But if a person is idle, his thoughts will easily go wrong, and if he works too hard, he will easily have problems. Of course, as long as he has the ability, the author will naturally update more. After all, if he updates more, everyone will have the desire to read, and the results will be good. Even if it is to win everyone's subscriptions, the author will definitely work hard. But this time, I will not set the rules for awards and additional updates. Although I really hope to have rewards, there is a saying that people should do what they can, and the author really hopes that this book can be completed with quality and quantity. So although it is a pity, considering my current state, I will not ask for it for now. Of course, subscriptions for additional chapters are still necessary. After all, this is the author's tradition for every book. The editor told me on Friday that the number of paid follow-up readings was 4,800, and now it must have exceeded 5,000. After it is put on the shelves, it will definitely be higher with the continuous strong promotion by Sanjiang. But I heard that the conversion rate of follow-up reading to subscriptions is not as stable as before, so I dare not have too high expectations. So the goal is to order 3,000 first. If the first order exceeds 3,000 in 24 hours, additional chapters will be added, and 1 chapter will be added for every 500 subscriptions. After 24 hours, 1 chapter will be added for every 500 increase in average subscriptions until the book is completed and valid for a long time. Finally, the performance of new books on the shelves is really critical and directly affects the subsequent promotion resources. Once again, I implore everyone to subscribe and at least give a first order. See you at 0:05 tonight. Chapter 83 Urgent Mission. The red mark means that there is no way to counterattack and can only dodge. But the enemy came too suddenly, and Chu Cheng was concentrating on scanning in detective mode the previous second, so he was caught off guard and didn't have time to dodge. Batman was hit by the group of figures, like hitting a truck, breaking the door, and falling into the living room. He was a very strong guy, with only a white vest on his upper body, almost like he was about to be burst by his swollen body. His facial features were distorted, and his bloodshot eyes almost protruded from his eye sockets. His nose was panting heavily like a bull in the Colosseum. From the distorted face alone, it was impossible to tell what this person originally looked like, but the scanning device in Batman's helmet immediately performed facial recognition and comparison, and quickly recognized the owner of this strange face. Yoshimura. Chu Cheng was a little surprised when he saw the recognition result. If it weren't for the facial recognition of the Bat computer, this person's mother would not be able to recognize that this person was the missing milk tea shop owner Yoshimura from this face with distorted features. It's just that the infected Yoshimura looked much stronger than in the photo. You want to take her away from me? That won't happen. Yoshimura growled vaguely, not as long as I'm here. Chu Cheng was confused by this. But the other party didn't give him a chance to ask questions, and continued to rush forward with a strange cry of "Ah!" Batman jumped sideways, and missed his attack, and then hit the other party with 2 consecutive punches. If it were an ordinary person, his nerves would be paralyzed after taking these 2 punches, but it was obviously not very effective for this infected person. He was very strong and fast, which could be seen from the speed of the flashing counter-attack mark. Batman slid to avoid Yoshimura's fist again, and then threw a bat dart. Yoshimura grabbed the dart in his palm with his big hand, but he didn't expect that the dart he caught suddenly burst out with an amazing electric current. His burly body trembled briefly, and black smoke rose from his body, smelling like a piece of burnt meat. Batman stood up, but just as he stood up, and had no time to take out his next prop, a dull thud came from behind him. The gaming headset allowed Chu Cheng to hear all the sounds around Batman in person. If he was experienced and listened carefully, he could hear the source and distance of the sound. And this sound came from behind him. It was very close. The wall behind him was penetrated again, and a hideous figure flew out with a sharp cry. It was a woman with messy black hair and black nails-like claws, grabbing Batman head-on. It was too late to step forward and dodge, so Chu Cheng could only press the right button to defend. Batman raised his arm to block one of his hands, but the other hand went all the way along his shoulder to his chest. A long scratch was left on the outermost layer of the batsuit, revealing the protective fiber and armor underneath. Batman counterpunched the woman in the face with a backhand, temporarily knocking her away. At this time, facial recognition also recognized her identity. She was the missing mistress of the house, Mrs. Yoshimura. At the same time, Yoshimura behind him had already rushed up again, and the red warning sign appeared on the screen again. Chu Cheng controlled Batman to dodge, and at the same time, Mrs. Yoshimura's attack was already in front of him. Their infection level was not low, stronger than the average infected, but relatively speaking, their state was also very unstable. This infection intensity gave them great power, but they were also on the verge of collapse and self-explosion. The high infection intensity made them more agile than ordinary people, so their attack rhythm was very fast. In the eyes of Batman, a fighting master, although each of their moves was full of flaws, from the perspective of martial arts, Batman had at least a dozen means to defeat the enemy with any loophole. However, their advantage was that they were very fast, had thick skin and flesh, and had their own blood recovery. Batman used various skills to continuously counterattack and dismantle the layers of attacks of the couple. His cloak danced with his flexible body, and his dark figure moved through the storm, dodging and quickly changing positions. The master was not very good at encounters. His best fighting rhythm has always been that the enemy is in the dark, and he observes the situation in advance and makes a plan. Once the battle begins, everything will proceed according to his plan. So what he should do is to choose the right equipment and plan the right tactics, and use scientific methods to defeat them one by one, or there is a simpler and more brutal method. Batman broke the window and jumped onto the lawn outside. The infected couple also broke out of the window on the left and right and chased out of the house. But Batman was half squatting on the ground, raising his hand and smashing it on the ground. With a snap, the smoke bomb exploded, and the thick smoke covered the figure of the bat. The two infected broke through the smoke, but saw that there was no one outside the house. Or rather, there was no one on the ground. The next moment, Yoshimura raised his head suddenly and saw the figure standing on their roof, the flawless white knight, standing high above, the noble white cloak undulating in the night wind, with his back against the white moon as bright as a jade plate. Moonlight Knight, Mark Spector, the main personality. The white cape spread out, like crescent-shaped wings. The knight glided down, put his legs together, and kicked Yoshimura fiercely. The burly body of the infected was suddenly struck by lightning, and flew backwards like a kite with a broken string. Mrs. Yoshimura screamed sharply, waving her long nails and grabbing over. Moonlight Knight stretched out his hand, and grabbed her wrist, and casually raised his leg, and kicked her in the lower abdomen. Mrs. Yoshimura screamed, and was kicked away, crashing the flower bed on the lawn. No, you can't. I won't let you break us up. No one can. No one. Yoshimura struggled to get up, mumbling vaguely while rushing forward again, swinging a powerful fist. But Moonlight Knight is not a mortal body like Batman. He raised his hand lightly, opened his 5 fingers, and caught the opponent's fist. In an instant, an invisible shock wave erupted from the palm of Moonlight Knight, and the wind wave made his cloak roll like waves. But Moonlight Knight stood still like a wooden stake, motionless. Moonlight Knight easily deflected the opponent's next attack, and then punched him in the lower abdomen with a backhand punch. Yoshimura's body flew up like a sandbag, spitting out a mouthful of blood. If you can't take her away, no one can take her away from me, my family, ours. Who is the she you are talking about, Yoshimura? Moonlight Knight stepped forward. Is she your child? What happened? Our child. Yes, no one can take our child away from me. He tried hard to get up, but perhaps the damage to his internal organs was too serious, or perhaps his body could not bear the deepening infection. After struggling twice, the big guy finally fell to the ground and did not move. Mrs. Yoshimura also fell in the flower bed, with her head tilted, her eyes wide open in a creepy way, but she was also motionless. Chu Cheng breathed a sigh of relief. Well, at least the missing case can be closed, so it's not a complete loss. After the cooldown period for changing characters was over, the operating character was changed to Batman this time. Chu Cheng went back to complete the DNA extraction scan of the objects in the house. This was what he had planned to do before he was interrupted. The next step is to borrow the database of the 9th office and wait for the DNA comparison results of the Bat computer to see if he can find out who the mysterious child in the house is. Just after uploading the sample for analysis and comparison, a striking exclamation mark suddenly popped up on the map, not far from Batman's current location. And it is different from the usual mission event logo. This time, an unprecedentedly huge and eye-catching bright red exclamation mark popped up. Chapter 84, Weird Change. This was indeed the first time Chu Cheng had seen such a mark. The size of the mark was a circle larger than usual, and the bright color of death reminded the player that this event was unusual. According to previous gaming experience, the more eye-catching the event was, the more important it was. In a normal game, Chu Cheng might have regarded it as the main plot of the game. But considering the nature of his current game as a cheat code, it seemed unlikely that such a game could have any main quests. His night tour experience after the delivery of Lawyama had made him realize that the exclamation mark on the map might not be refreshed by the system recognition, but by the hero he was currently operating. Maybe he saw it when he passed by in the air, or maybe he monitored the radio, or there were other traces. But generally, the mark would appear on the map only when the hero himself felt that there was something worth noting. This was the first time Chu Cheng had seen such a mark, so of course he couldn't miss it. He uploaded the DNA information for comparison, and then controlled Batman to raise his hand and grab the edge of a building with a grappling gun. His cloak opened and disappeared into the night like a bat with wings spread. The location was not far away. After rising and falling in the shadow on the roof for a while, Batman soon found the location. The detective mode scan confirmed the blind spot of the surveillance. Chu Cheng operated Batman to land in the shadow of the top floor and carefully observed the situation below. It was an old building with serious peeling of wall paint. It looked like it should be quite old. He saw many cars parked at the door at the bottom of the building, and a group of soldiers wearing black combat uniforms and armed with live ammunition were surrounding it. Entering the first-person perspective of Batman's detective mode, the camera zoomed in, and he seemed to see Chen Miao among them. One of us? So is there a party at the Special Service Asylum tonight? He quickly thought that it was not difficult to find out what exactly was going on. After all, now he, or Batman to be more precise, has a monthly pass for the Special Service bus, so he can find anything in the database of the Jiangdu branch. After turning on the computer installed on Batman's wrist and entering the query, he quickly found out what was going on here. It is said that this asylum happened to have an event today. Based on the report from the general public, they investigated and locked an infected person. It was initially determined that the infection level was not low. Tonight is the time to execute their arrest plan. This also reminded Chu Cheng that the people in the madhouse are actually doing their job. It's just that Chu Cheng was too efficient in grabbing experience and heads in the past few times. Every time, he went to eat up all the economy by himself and left the 9th Special Service to clean up behind him. After so many times, the image of the madhouse in his mind became strange. But in fact, this madhouse often feels unreliable, but at least they are still doing the work of cleaning up the infected. The arrest plan is not to directly pull the agents in and search every room. After all, the infection coefficient of the infected in this broken building that looks like a horror movie studio is not low. Going in directly is inefficient, dangerous, and prone to accidents. A large amount of tear gas smoked out the infected inside. The disheveled woman broke through the window and rushed out to the open space outside angrily, but she was greeted by a powerful concussion bomb. The woman's hearing and vision were paralyzed in an instant, and she stumbled to the ground when she landed. Of course, these weapons have limited restrictions on the infected, and she will recover soon. But the mobile team will certainly not give her this opportunity. The dense rain of bullets rushed up at her the moment she stopped moving, like a tidal wave. Flowers of blood continued to explode on the woman's body, and the powerful impact made her lie on the ground and twitch constantly, and bullet shells fell all over the ground with crackling. The physique and recovery ability of the infected are indeed strong, but no matter how strong they are, there is a limit. When the rain of bullets stopped, the infected's body was twisted, the bones were severely deformed, and the leg joints were twisted like twists. The bloody thing could hardly be called a human being, but it still crawled on the ground with a creepy tenacity. No, you can't. No one can take her away. I won't allow it. Others may not have noticed it yet, but Chu Cheng, who was high up, had a thought, and paid attention to this sentence. The same reaction as the Yoshimura couple just now, but soon she used up her last bit of strength, and fell to the ground without moving. The infected person was dealt with, and the matter seemed to have come to an end. Next is the finishing work of the 9th Division. They will contain and identify the degree of infection of the infected person. Of course, unlike the slightly infected person in the milk tea shop earlier tonight, this person should be hopeless. It seems to have ended perfectly here. What makes Chu Cheng feel strange is that such an ordinary and simple arrest operation. Why is there such a striking red mark on the map? Is it because the Special Service Lunatic Asylum rarely mobilizes so many troops for such a time? Mobile team member Chang Liang stood upright in the team. Although the target has been captured, as a mobile team member, he still did not let down his guard at all. This is one of the most basic knowledge points you need to remember in the Special Service 9th Division. Never let down your guard. What they have to face are often all kinds of things beyond common sense. On the battlefield, even in the cleanup and mopping up links, strange changes may occur. As field agents, all they can do is to keep their eyes open and ears alert, and be prepared for any possible changes. Facts have proved that this vigilance is necessary. When his sight unconsciously swept over the action leader Chen Miayu, his pupils suddenly shrank, and he almost cried out in surprise. He saw a pair of hands behind his superior, as if they were poking out from the bottomless netherworld. A rotten head was placed on Chen Miayu's shoulder, staring at him fiercely with the most sinister and vicious eyes. Chang Liang almost immediately raised his gun and pointed it in that direction, but what he was greeted with was the astonished expressions of Chen Miayu and his colleagues around him. "Agent Chang Liang, what do you want to do?" Chen Miayu asked coldly. Chang Liang was stunned for a moment. He was about to explain, but he was even more surprised to find that the rotten head was gone. There was no one behind Chen Miayu, nothing. He hurriedly put away his gun, but didn't know how to explain for a while. Chen Miayu frowned slightly. "Is this infected? This doesn't happen often, but it has happened before. The field agents of the 9th Special Service are basically all special agents, but even the immunity of special agents varies, and occasionally there are agents who are infected. But this is not a big problem. Usually, even if a special person is infected, the degree of infection is not serious, and it is easier to eliminate the influence than ordinary people." She was about to say a few words to comfort him, but was interrupted by the nervous communication in the headset. "Captain," someone shouted hurriedly, while firing a gun. "Infected." Chen Miayu immediately turned around, and was surprised to find that an infected person suddenly appeared behind the team, and was so close that he was already touching the faces of the agents. Their formation was broken up. Some agents were shooting at the infected, while others were entangled in close combat, and had to temporarily abandon their guns and switch to daggers to fight the infected in close combat. Chen Miayu was puzzled. The battle site was scouted by them long ago, and even the general residence had been evacuated. There should be no one nearby, except the target of the encirclement. Where did such a large number of infected people come from? But she was in the middle of a battle, and didn't have time to think about it. She made a quick decision. Team 3, adopt C formation. Other support. She was interrupted before she finished her order. Infected people appear. Group 5 requests support. She turned her head and found that the infected people appeared in another direction of the team. An agent had been pinned to the ground and was struggling to exchange fire with the infected people riding on him. They were ambushed. Although she didn't know how the enemy did it, the fact was beyond doubt. Maybe their actions were exposed from the beginning, or maybe they were set up from the beginning. But as the captain, she had to stay calm. In any case, she had to stabilize the situation first. All units. She didn't have time to finish again. But this time it was not someone who interrupted her, but the shaking of the ground. The ground suddenly began to shake, and the surrounding buildings seemed to be shaky. The cracks spread at an alarming speed, the ground sank, and the houses sank to the bottom through the cracks in the ground, and smoke filled the air. From the crisscrossing cracks, huge, thick tentacles emerged. Huge tentacles stretched out from the ground, some tightly wrapped around the surrounding buildings, and some reinserted into the ground like tree roots. A huge, terrifying thing slowly emerged from the ground, and came to the surface. Chapter 85 Reality. Instantly, a sense of trembling gripped everyone present. It was a being that made people's breathing stagnate just by looking at it, with a huge body and a twisted posture. Thick tentacles seemed to be sticking out from its face, and its entire body was covered with a layer of scales that seemed to be made of unknown substances. Things were completely out of control. Chen Miao commanded the team to shrink its formation, while seeking support from the headquarters. But there was no response, and the only answer she got from the headset was a desperate rustling sound. The surrounding buildings were separated, and the sky seemed to be divided into two halves by a transparent line, and was overlapped along the fold line. The two pieces of the sky were like mirrors hanging in the sky, and everything was reflected in the mirror and moved rapidly, like a dazzling kaleidoscope. The ground also began to be divided along the same line, and the floor tiles floated up one by one, as if a suspended escalator was built. A figure appeared from the other end of the escalator. He was wearing a sophisticated black tuxedo, a bow tie, a mask with a hypnotic vortex pattern on his face, and a thick black cane in his hand. He stepped on the suspended bricks, as if he had walked out of a kaleidoscope in the sky, and lightly crossed the entire battlefield. More than one agent turned the muzzle of the gun, and pointed it at him, pulling the trigger at him without saying anything. When the agents were questioned later, they all said that they didn't know why they did it. Rather than on-the-spot judgment, this was more like their body's stress response, as if every cell in their body was telling them that they had to shoot at this moment. Because they were afraid of him. Gunshots rang out from all directions, and bullets swept in. But the man in the tuxedo seemed unaware, and continued to walk on the suspended bricks, ignoring the bullets from all around. The bullets stopped. All the bullets stopped at the same time, about 2 or 3 meters away from the masked man. It was as if someone had paused the world's timeline, or as if even the ruthless metal bullets were afraid of this person. The rain of bullets hovered in the air strangely, and disappeared after a moment. The masked man continued to walk down calmly with his cane, as if he had not noticed the shooting at all. Special Service Division 9. The masked man smiled. I have wanted to meet you for a long time. Before he finished speaking, Chen Miao threw something. The thing rolled to the masked man's feet. A sound and light grenade. The body of this thing is made of plastic, and the body will be torn into pieces the moment the explosives are detonated. The huge noise released at that moment is enough to tear the eardrum, and the reaction of the internal chemicals will burst into strong light in an instant, and the stimulation to the retina can cause people to go blind temporarily. Or it should be so. But at the moment when the concussion bomb exploded, the man snapped his fingers. Suddenly, the strong light and heavy roar all disappeared, along with the exploding bomb. The next second, the missing grenade suddenly exploded between the agents' formations on the other side. The defenseless agents were instantly deprived of their mobility by the strong light and roar. Chen Miao was shocked. What kind of ghostly ability is this? At the same time, a huge tentacle creature was hovering over everyone's heads, and its thick and powerful tentacles were whipping the ground one after another, causing it to crack. At the same time, the buildings and the ground were moving strangely, and even the sky seemed to be kneaded by an invisible hand. The tide of infected people almost swallowed them up. Some agents were shooting at the infected people around them. Some agents were fighting with several infected people who were close to their faces, and some agents were dodging and desperately shooting at the huge black shadow in the air. It was as if the whole world suddenly began to fall apart. Personally, I hate violence. The masked man said calmly, but this is the choice of mankind, isn't it? To use force to face everything they don't understand. People reject everything unknown, which is why the great God has determined that humans are not qualified. He stopped when he said this, and the eyes exposed on the mask narrowed. He turned around slowly. The moon was bright in the sky, and the holy moonlight was like a gift from God pouring down on the land where sin was bred. The white knight opened his cloak, as if he had jumped down from the moon, and fell to the ground with a dull bang. Moonlight Knight. I was wondering when you crazy people in strange costumes would show your faces. The masked man didn't seem to care about the arrival of the uninvited guest. The Moonlight Knight said nothing, kicked his feet, opened his cloak, and his figure turned into a snow white afterimage and flew towards him. The masked man stood still, looking at the Moonlight Knight rushing towards him, motionless, as if he had it all planned out. The huge black shadow in the air raised a tentacle, which seemed to fall down with a mighty force, and hit the Moonlight Knight's body with a precise blow. The strange force sank the ground, and scattered gravel everywhere. Ha, I don't know who you are, the masked man sneered, but no one can stand in front of the supreme lettuce. Before he finished speaking, he saw a flash of afterimage in front of him, and the white knight rushed out of the smoke screen blasted by the tentacles, and rushed in front of him. The masked man was shocked, and hurriedly raised his cane to block horizontally. The Moonlight Knight punched his cane, and the cyclone stirred by the strange force made the white cloak whirring. The ground where the two stood was also blown into cracks, and the impact torrent flipped the masked man on his back. The pupils under the man's mask shrank. This speed and strength are far beyond the upper limit of the ability of ordinary special people. In addition, the tentacle attack seemed to have no reaction at all. While his mind was turning rapidly, the masked man flipped in the air and landed lightly. He thrust his right cane into the ground, and a stream of energy seemed to seep into the ground along the cane. At the same time, he stretched out his left hand with 5 fingers. A dividing line spread rapidly forward with the cane landing point as the center. The ground on both sides of the Moonlight Knight's body was split into 2 halves, one on the left, and one on the right. As if there was a spring at the bottom, the 2 floors suddenly bounced up at a 90-degree angle, and with a muffled bang, the White Knight was sandwiched in the middle like a sandwich. Still ineffective. The Moonlight Knight, who should have been sandwiched into a meat paste, rushed out from the closed stone slabs with a bang. He was like a silver bullet, and he would never stop until he bit the target to death, as long as the trigger was pulled. Impossible. The masked man stared at the knight with a fluttering cape, and his previous calmness was completely gone. That look was just like the French seeing their team lose to the Chinese men's football team in the World Cup, and the expression on his face was written, "Why am I having such a dream?" The others who caught a glimpse of this scene were also shocked. What is this person's way so wild? Did he unlock the health lock, or what? This was the first time for everyone, including Chen Miaoyu, to see this white knight. The dreamy cloak seemed to come in the moonlight, bathed in the sacred light, but cold and deadly. Yes, like a white god of death. Once he decided to take a life, nothing could stop him from moving forward. At the last moment of lightning and fire, surging energy erupted from the bottom of the masked man's cane. A large area of land in front of him suddenly sank, and the bricks and stones seemed to be swallowed by the void. The entire ground disappeared directly, leaving only large areas of nothingness and darkness. The ground in the entire space disappeared. It was as if the hand of God wiped out the space between the man and the Moonlight Knight, leaving only endless nothingness, a chaos that no one could cross. But the Moonlight Knight crossed the nothingness under the shocked eyes of everyone, and continued to approach the masked man. Even if the road under his feet disappeared, and the space was erased, nothing could stop his footsteps. To others, the scene looked a bit like the classic old animations represented by Tom and Jerry, where the funny characters rushed out of the cliff and ran into the air. As long as they didn't lock down, they could successfully rush to the other side. It looked a bit funny here, but it also made the unstoppable white figure look more terrifying, like an invincible god of war. The masked man raised his cane and hit Yuki. Yuki easily raised his arm to block it, but the man also used his other free hand to make a fist and hit from a completely opposite angle, which was also blocked by Yuki's open palm. The two sides were in a brief stalemate. The masked man looked cold and gloomy. "You can see the truth, right?" Chapter 86, The Battle of Gods. A few minutes ago, when Chu Cheng saw the giant creature that seemed to be a counter-boss came out of the strange phenomenon, he was actually a little confused. Although it was the first red exclamation mark on the map, he did not expect that this matter could be so explosive and directly caused such a heavy weight to come out. The appearance of the masked man next surprised him a little. The ability to transform the space at will made Chu Cheng feel that it was a bit difficult to take him down. He thought about it and changed to Moonlight Knight to help the asylum. At worst, he could run away if he couldn't beat him. If it didn't work, he would be a hero after losing his life. After all, he would be a hero again after the cooldown. But when he switched his character to Moonlight Knight and was about to find a suitable angle to pounce into the field, he suddenly heard a voice from the direction behind him in the headset. People are always like this, trusting their own eyes, being easily fooled, and being easily deceived. Chu Cheng was stunned, turned his perspective and looked back, and found a bird standing behind him. To be more precise, it should be said that the head of that thing is similar to the shape of a vulture, with a skeleton-like appearance and a long and sharp beak. The lower body has a human-like torso and limbs, wearing a grey-white robe, holding a halberd-like weapon, with a sharp tip like a crescent moon. That is the god who gave the Moonlight Knight the ability, the moon god Kang Su. Chu Cheng knew him, but it was because he knew him that he was more surprised. In this game, the Moonlight Knight buys one and gets one free, and also comes with the moon god. It is well known that Mark was a mercenary before he became the Moon Knight. He met Kang Su when he was dying in the Egyptian temple. At that time, Kang Su said, "Mark Spectre, open your eyes. I'm Kang Su. I see that you have a fine skeleton, and you are a good material for becoming an incarnation to uphold justice. And I can't move alone on the earth, so we must unite to fight against evil." Maybe Mark was ecstatic when he heard it, thinking that this wave is familiar to me. Isn't this Ultraman? So he agreed again and again. As a result, you thought he had a stable job in M78, but he actually joined an Egyptian private enterprise, and from then on began a miserable life of being exploited by unscrupulous capitalists poor. In short, whether it is comics or MCU, Kang Su's goal is indeed to eliminate evil and protect night travelers, but this broken bird is definitely not wronged for being a capitalist and hanging it on the street lamp. Chu Cheng even felt that there was reason to suspect that this broken bird might have expected this situation. So in order to prevent the embarrassing situation of being hung on the street lamp, it didn't have a neck at all. What do you mean? The question was asked by the Moon Knight on the screen. Look with your heart, Mark Spectre, not your eyes. Kang Su stabbed his crescent staff heavily on the ground. These are just some fancy tricks. So can you help me or not? Kang Su snorted disdainfully. I'm the moon god. It is easy to break this inferior trick, the moon god said, and raised the crescent staff in his hand. Transparent energy waves were released from the tip of the crescent, like a beam of light shooting into the sky. Then the scene Chu Cheng saw on the screen also changed immediately. The split sky returned to its original appearance, and the giant tentacle creature in the style of Cthulhu disappeared out of thin air. The sinking buildings were still arranged in place, and the agents below were either killing each other or fighting wits and courage with the air. So all those just now were just illusions. The setting of Egyptian gods like Kang Su is a bit painful. They are like ghosts in the human world and have no entity. They can't touch anything in the mortal world or hurt mortals. So if he wants to punish the evil, he has to trick Moonlight Knight into doing it. If his own employees don't do it, he, as a god, can't even steal the old man's crutches. But it should be said that this broken bird is still reliable when playing as an auxiliary, at least when he and Mark have the same goal. After being given the control-free buff by Kang Su, Chu Cheng operated Moonlight Knight to airdrop directly into the field, and then there was a series of scenes just now. Actually, the ability of the masked man is not simply visual deception, but dreaming. He created a daydream and dragged all the targets within the range into the dream he dominated. Here, the boundary between dream and reality will be very blurred in the eyes of the dreamer, and everything in this field is at his mercy. Of course, it is still just a dream. He cannot cause physical damage to the dreamer through the creations in the dream, but he can operate the dreamer's 5 senses in the dream field. What the dreamer sees, hears, and touches are all the same as reality, and it is impossible to distinguish between dreams and reality. So he is absolutely invincible in this dream, or it should be so. However, it is ineffective against the Moonlight Knight who has the Moon Goddess buff. The close combat is completely suppressed by the Moonlight Knight. The masked man was hit by several powerful punches, and his bones seemed to be crushed to pieces. He is very sure that this is not the power that a special person should have. No matter how high the infection level of a special person is, he is still bound by the mortal body. Even if he may awaken strange abilities, his physical strength cannot reach this level. No, this couldn't be a special person. Are you Phantom? The masked man stared at Moonlight Knight and asked in a deep voice. Still no answer. The next whip kick made him feel as if his spine was dislocated, as if a meteor hammer hit his abdomen hard. He couldn't understand what was on the other side, but at this time he had fully realized that the other party was not trapped in the dream dominated by him. The other party ignored all the distorted space and rewritten reality in the dream realm, as if he could see the truth through the fabricated illusion. The masked man quickly calmed down from the horror. He couldn't feel the pain, and the displacement of internal organs and the dislocation of bones did not stop his thoughts. Not affected by the effects of dreams? Okay. But his dreams don't have to act on the enemy to work. The masked man thought, and a small number of agents scattered around immediately turned their guns and pointed them in the direction of Moonlight Knight. All the muzzles flashed with fire one after another, and bullets whistled in. Those agents were in a dream, and their 5 senses had been distorted by the dream. In their perception, they were all fighting with the infected and giant creatures. So what happened in reality was that the agents who were fighting wits and courage with the air, or hanging up in place like teammates who had lost connection in the canyon, suddenly turned their heads and aimed at Moonlight Knight and began to attack their friendly forces. But from the perspective of all the agents present, the space they were in was distorted again like a folded mirror. The rain of bullets they shot out all sank into the cracks connecting the two spaces, and then more cracks and gaps flew out from all directions, all shooting towards the White Knight. Moonlight Knight stood in the center of the metal storm, his white cloak spread out like wings, and the bullets in the sky strangely sank into his cloak, splashing countless white ripples like hitting the surface of a lake, and even the kinetic energy was eaten up. Then he shook his hand casually, and the dense rain of bullets suddenly turned, sweeping towards the masked man in front of him like an overwhelming force. Countless bullets tore his body apart, and almost instantly he was beaten to a bloody mess. The scene from the third person's perspective was even more amazing. The agents only saw the masked man exert his strength, and the bullets in the sky suddenly shifted in space and hit the White Knight, and then the knight exerted his strength again, and the bullets turned again, like a great shift of heaven and earth, and smashed the masked man into pieces. They began to doubt whether they opened it in the wrong way. What is this? A battle between gods? Question mark? Chapter 87 Dreamwalker. The mobile team members had already deeply felt that the situation seemed to be beyond their ability. It felt as if the style of the incident had suddenly changed from a somewhat weird ghost hunting operation to some kind of fairy movie. Two gods fought around them and caused a strange phenomenon in the world. They, a group of mortals, were trembling in the middle. However, this shocking fight finally ended with the next punch of Moonlight Knight landing on the masked man's face. The white mask finally collapsed under the huge force of the punch. The mask shattered into debris all over the sky, and the man fell with his head raised and spit out a large mouthful of blood. At that moment, he seemed to hear the sound of his cheekbones shattering, exploding like thunder in his ears. His cane was also knocked to the side, and he fell head first. When the body in a suit and leather shoes fell heavily to the ground, everything in the scene began to change. Everything in the picture began to disappear. The huge tentacle monster turned into a shadow and dissipated. The broken ground returned to its original state, and the building that sank into the ground still stood in place. The infected people in all directions also disappeared instantly. The confused agents came to their senses, and some found themselves shooting at an empty place, while others found themselves riding on their teammates and wrestling with each other. The infected people who were entangled in front of them suddenly turned invisible and disappeared. Chen Miayu hurriedly turned her head to the direction of the masked man again, but was surprised to find that there was no masked man here at all. The one who was knocked down and stepped on by the Moonlight Knight was the female infected person who should have been solved by them. At this time, the infected person's body was covered with bullet holes and had long been unrecognizable. Her head was cracked, and even half of her brain was exposed outside, but she was still moaning vaguely, "No, my child. No one can touch my child." The matter is actually very simple. There was no masked man interfering, no new infected people entering the scene, and no giant tentacle creatures. A person with abilities who never showed up from beginning to end ambushed all of them. The person with the ability dragged all of them into a large dream, in which he fabricated a large number of infected people and giant monsters attacking them, and created the illusion of a distorted space of heaven and earth. As for the masked man, he was actually the female infected person they planned to capture from the beginning. The dream maker disguised the infected person in the dream as the masked man, and borrowed her body to act. But in fact, the infected person was also one of the characters controlled by the dream, and she became the puppet of the dream maker. From the very beginning of the capture operation, when the mobile team smoked the infected person out of the building and subdued him with fire, in fact, all of them had already fallen into a dream. What they saw were the images that the dream maker let them see, and the infected person was not subdued at all. After Chu Ching had the moon god Kang Su add a buff, he controlled the Moonlight Knight to get close to the masked man and saw through his true face. The masked man turned back into the appearance of an infected person in his display screen. At this moment, somewhere else, the man's tense body relaxed. He was wearing an elegant tuxedo, a swirl-shaped mask on his face, and a strange-shaped cane leaning against his hand. His eyes narrowed under the mask, as if he was thinking, "It doesn't look like it's going well." A female voice came from behind. The woman walked up to him. She was a woman who was seductive to the core, with very little clothing on her body, revealing a large area of snow-white skin. Under her long skirt, which was slit to the arms, she revealed two plump, white long legs. From the shadow, it was difficult to tell whether there was anything underneath. There was an invisible charm in her every move, and a faint fragrance wafted over before she even arrived. But the woman had already come close to her ear and blew the wind. But the masked man remained indifferent, still frowning and thinking under the mask. Dreams don't work on him. He murmured to himself, but this is impossible. Oh, there are people who are not bewitched by the dream walker? The woman smiled and put her snow white arm on the man's shoulder and rested her head on it. Who is so special? The masked man shrugged his shoulders, avoided her arm calmly, and said coldly, "A white guy. We have never met him before, but he is very powerful. And not only that, he can see through illusions and find the truth from the dream." "Oh, so powerful?" The woman laughed again. She didn't seem to care about the other party's coldness, but moved closer, intentionally or unintentionally scratching the front with the dazzling white headlights. "Do you want me to help?" she said, showing a confident smile. "No matter how strong he is still a man after all. All men have weaknesses. You just need to understand them and find the right way." "No," the masked man interrupted coldly, glancing at the woman. "Put away your tricks. Not everyone will follow your way. He is a strong warrior, and perhaps a determined warrior. But it doesn't matter. He is an accident to me, but not a trouble. He won't be so lucky next time." "Then why don't you go in and get rid of him yourself now?" the woman asked, while playing with his bow tie. The masked man joked. He couldn't hold back a word for a long time, and just gave the woman a cold look through the mask. The woman chuckled. "You're not sure, are you? Because you're not as confident as you say. Oh, don't tell me you have other plans for him or something, like the villains in the movies, who are looking for death like to say. It's not that complicated. The answer is actually very simple. Because of the White Knight, he scares you, doesn't he? Because you met someone who can't even control your dreams, someone you can't read, you can't control, and you don't even know anything about." As she spoke, she moved closer and closer, and finally almost blew into the man's ear. She stretched out her hand from her shoulder to the man's chest and whispered, "Don't worry, I know this feeling. The long lost feeling, that something makes you feel beyond common sense." The masked man grabbed her wrist to stop her from moving. "Everyone will have fears and the most terrifying nightmares deep in their hearts. And unfortunately for them, digging out these is what I'm best at. the masked man said in a deep voice. Just wait. The White Knight, whoever he is, I will find his fear and use the darkest nightmare to impress him the most. Until he is exhausted, desperate in the endless cycle of nightmares, his mind is shattered, and then I will mercifully grant him death. 5 updates today. Tomorrow at noon as usual. 2 updates will be posted, and then more updates will be added, based on the first subscription statistics as of this time tomorrow evening. Chapter 88 The Past. Crash. Chu Cheng was still immersed in the gentleness of the bed in the last second, and was awakened by the sun shining mercilessly on his face in the next second. He opened his hazy sleepy eyes in the sunlight that was difficult to adapt to for a while, only to find that his mother was standing by the drawn curtains like a sleep destroyer, looking at her son who was wrapped up like a rice bug with disgust. It's 10 o'clock, and you're still not getting up. Don't you want to stay in the morning? Chu Cheng wanted to say that it was normal for this game to stay at home for the morning, so what's the big deal? While thinking, he took the mobile phone on the bedside, opened it, and his face changed drastically. Isn't it less than 9 o'clock? But his mother didn't argue with him, and went out like a general who had won a battle. Chu Cheng stayed in bed for more than 10 minutes, and then got up yawning. The rewards for the task last night were still quite a lot, but it was a pity that the guy who pretended to be a ghost and dreamed was not caught and pressed. Chu Cheng's intuition told him that the guy must have more experience points. I can only wait until next time. I don't know if it's because I asked the moon god Kangsu to buff me, but the cost of operating Moon Knight is really not small. I was a little exhausted after fighting last night, so I logged off this evening, took a tonic, and went to bed. I felt much better after a good sleep. Chu Cheng got dressed and washed up, and came back to see his mother tidying up his bed and folding his quilt in the room. He didn't think anything was wrong at first, but when he saw the box of unused tonics on the bedside, he took a breath and almost blurted out, "Mom, listen to my explanation," but fortunately he held back. Fortunately, this time his mother didn't ask why are some of these figures not wearing clothes, like she did when she saw his figurine cabinet that year, but she didn't say a word, as if nothing had happened. But even if he didn't mention it, he guessed that his mother should have seen it, but he couldn't explain it actively. After all, it didn't sound like he was just playing games and needed to replenish. Chu Cheng looked at the broken box of medicine again and felt a little annoyed. I feel that this thing is useful, but it always hurts people's reputation. It would be great if I could have the protection of the moon god like Moon Knight. In Egyptian mythology, Kangsu, as the god of light and night, not only protects night travelers, but also is responsible for enhancing male fertility. So he thought that this Moonlight Knight must have additional benefits for working for Kangsu. After eating something casually in the morning, Chu Cheng took his mother out to find food at noon. Yesterday, he had planned to go to the opposite business district to stroll around and eat at 2 stores that he always thought had a good reputation. Unfortunately, a wave of poisoning in the milk tea shop yesterday killed the entire business district. Although the infection has been cleared by the Special Service Division 9, the business district is still under lockdown for the time being, and it is estimated that it will not be open for at least the next week. So Chu Cheng took his mother to the only other business district nearby to find food. But the problem is that there are only these 2 places to eat and play in the area nearby. If one of them is killed, the other one will immediately become people's first choice. In addition, it seems that this area may be crowded with people who come out to hang out on weekends, so the area near the business district is particularly lively. In fact, you can see it on the way there. The road is jammed early in the morning on weekends. Private cars lined up in a long line on the road. Some drivers gradually evolved from honking their horns to the most sincere greetings to each other's families. This reminded him of his relatives with road rage at home, who liked to say stinky DD and NMSL when they were on the road. However, although these 2 moves are powerful, they should not be used on the same person. Otherwise, after a set of combined punches, you will find that you have actually exchanged extreme one-on-one with the orphan player, and you will regret it because of your carelessness and loss of your mother. Entering the mall is also crowded with people. It is not time for dinner yet, but there are already queues at the entrances of major restaurants. But this is also expected. Chu Cheng got the number of the designated restaurant online early. When he arrived at the restaurant, there were only 2 or 3 tables left in front, so the two sat in the seats outside the door and waited. The two of them had nothing to say today. After yesterday's incident, Chu Cheng had already told his mother that he had a part-time job at the Special Service Division 9. Although it was just an odd job in the back row, it was a unit that dealt with danger after all. Although Huang Liping didn't say anything, she was definitely still a little uneasy. "There's something you don't know." She stared at the railing at the corridor for several seconds before she said, "It was the year you just left us and came here to attend college. Because you never left us and have always been by our side since we were young. So that made me very uneasy, and I was worried that your father would laugh at me for thinking too much. He said that you are a man and should have reached the age to be independent. He said that when he was your age, he would have already gone out on his own. But no matter what, I would still feel uneasy, especially in the first few days. I would dream of you every night, and I would wake up in the middle of the night. I would toss and turn thinking about you being so far away in a foreign land, whether you would miss home, whether you would not be able to adapt to living alone, and whether you could handle everything by yourself. I know what your father said makes sense, but I just can't feel at ease. I can't sleep peacefully." She paused, then turned to look at Chu Cheng. "Then I bought a plane ticket and flew to Jiangdu." This surprised Chu Cheng. "You come to Jiangdu when I just went to college?" "Yes, but you, Dad?" Chu Cheng was at a loss. "You didn't tell me, because I don't want you to know that I'm worried, and I don't want you to think that I'm interfering too much in your life." Huang Liping said softly, "I only stayed for 1 day. I got off the plane at 6 in the morning and found your address. I watched you go out, watched you buy breakfast and go to school. I watched you go to class and eat lunch outside the classroom. Then you went back to the apartment and ended the day. You looked very good, energetic, and independent, which is something I would never see when I kept you by my side. I flew back that night. Your dad came to the airport to pick me up after get off work and laughed at me, saying that I would never learn how to let go." Chu Cheng didn't know what to say for a moment. "I never knew. You have grown up, have your own life and your own plans. I also know that you are facing something that we may not understand. We will not persuade you to give up your own plans. But we just want you to know that no matter where you are and what you are facing, your father and I will always support you." Chu Cheng felt a slight soreness in his nose. He wanted to say something, but couldn't think of the right words for a moment. "I'll go ask how many tables are left in front." Chu Cheng didn't know why the words turned out like this when they came to his lips. He took a deep breath, stood up and prepared to walk towards the counter. But as soon as he stood up, he realized that there seemed to be a pair of eyes staring at him. He paused, turned his head, and looked in that direction, only to see a girl as delicate as a work of art in a white dress, also sitting in the waiting seat, tilting her head, staring at him with her big light blue eyes without blinking. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89. An Orphan. Chu Cheng recognized her quickly. After all, he had just met her yesterday, so in a way, she had saved him. The girl's name was Fanna, the only agent in the 9th Special Service Department who could freely control her own phantom. When they came to their senses, their eyes had already met. Chu Cheng was stunned for half a second, thinking that after all, they were colleagues, and she had just saved him yesterday, so it would be inappropriate not to express some expression when their eyes met, so he waved and greeted her. "Your colleague?" Huang Liping also came over. She had also seen Fanna outside the cordon of the milk tea shop last night and had an impression of her. "I guess so." Chu Cheng found that his mother seemed to be very interested in his colleague and soon greeted her enthusiastically. The girl tilted her head and thought about it and waved her hand. Huang Liping said that this place was very popular and there were so many people waiting to turn over the table early in the morning. Then she casually asked the girl for the number of the table. Fana carefully took out a folded piece of paper, opened it and took a look, then said in a very soft voice, "A 46. 46. What number are we?" Huang Liping looked at Chu Cheng. Chu Cheng shook the crumpled piece of paper in his pocket. "A 47. What a coincidence, we are together. There are 2 tables left in front, and it will be almost time." She noticed that the seats on both sides of the girl were empty. "Come alone." Fana nodded gently. Chu Cheng was also a little surprised. At least he rarely heard of anyone around him queuing up in front of such a restaurant early in the morning on weekends. "Are you not with friends?" Huang Liping was also curious. "Friends?" The girl thought for a while and shook her head. "No." Chu Cheng didn't know for a moment whether she meant she was not with friends or she didn't have any friends at all. "Alone." Mom was also surprised. "Then why don't we go together? It's just right to share a table." Chu Cheng wanted to say that maybe the girl just wanted to be alone for a while, but when the girl heard this, it seemed as if her eyes lit up and nodded to indicate that it was okay. A few minutes later, the waiter led them to sit down at a table that had just been cleaned. The 3 of them sat down and ordered the dishes, and then they started chatting around the table. Of course, they were talking, but in fact, it was basically the mother who was talking. In Chu Cheng's memory, she was always very talkative, but it seemed to be especially so today. Chu Cheng guessed that on the one hand, it might be because she was somewhat curious about her current job and colleagues at work, and on the other hand, it might be because she thought that the piglets she had raised for more than 20 years still couldn't eat cabbage, and as a mother, she must be a little anxious. In fact, to be fair, the girl was really beautiful. At least in Chu Cheng's impression, he seemed to have never seen anyone more pleasing to the eye than her in reality. Moreover, this rather childish face looked a bit like a punishment. If you hold someone's hand and walk on the street, you might be mistaken by the police uncle as someone with XP failure and be dealt with. If you must find something wrong with this almost perfect face and body, then perhaps it can only be this A-level figure. But a canyon swordsman once said that he had touched the peaks and entered the deep valleys, and both benefited people a lot. Each of these landscapes has its own unique charm. It can only be said that everyone has their own preferences, and it is difficult to argue who is stronger or weaker. Chu Cheng felt that there was nothing wrong with she was young and had her own airport, so she was a little rich. But the main problem was not this, but that this girl actually made him a little uneasy. First of all, the aura of her being the first agent who could control the Phantom made people a little uneasy. Considering the already uneasy attribute of the Secret Service, the girl had a feeling of the first clinical subject of a new treatment in a lunatic asylum. Then, although Chu Cheng was very grateful for her helping him yesterday, he had to say that he was a little scared during the process. The existence of the Phantom made people a little uneasy. Although the old thief Miyazaki and the Sky Grade seemed to guarantee that the girl's phantom was very stable and safe, you didn't believe what the old thief said, and you couldn't believe it at all. Besides, Fana's phantom itself gave people a very strange feeling. According to the information released by Miyazaki Leozui in the Special Service 9 app, the phantom should be something that is bred from the darkness or obsession in the heart of the special person, and it is an entity that has mutated from the mind. If you say that the image of a female ghost in red with disheveled hair has nothing to do with the girl herself, Chu Cheng doesn't believe it. So for the unknown players of the madhouse, Chu Cheng thinks it is good to maintain a friendly colleague relationship. If he gets closer or even close to negative distance contact, he may directly speed through to the ending of the hatchet and talk about life with Brother Cheng one day. And he also observed that Fana rarely speaks. It's not that she can't speak. Her voice is also very light and pleasant, but it gives people a feeling that she is very frugal and doesn't seem to be very willing to speak. It feels a bit like a dog chatting with a goddess. This side is typing a lot of chatter, and the other side is just and oh for a long time. The answer mode starts with 1 word and ends with 3 words, like a fucking robot. After waiting by the phone for most of the night, 4 words finally popped up. I was so happy for a few seconds, but after a closer look, I found that the person wrote I went to take a shower, which made me doubt my dog life. But after comparing it, I found that she seemed to be a little different from this kind of people. Because when you talk, you can clearly feel that she is listening very seriously, and will show that she cares a lot. It's just that she may really be not good at speaking for some special reasons. So, you live alone now? What do your parents do? Huang Liping asked along the topic brought up by the conversation. The girl answered the previous questions quickly and straightforwardly, but this time she obviously paused for a short time. Dad? She stared at the restaurant window absent-mindedly for a while, shook her head. No. Huang Liping realized that she might have talked about a sensitive topic. Sorry, I didn't mean it. With mom. Fana recovered from her brief absence and said seriously. Not alone. Huang Liping was stunned for a moment, but soon reacted and smiled. Really? That must be an amazing mother. Yeah. A glimmer of light appeared on the girl's stiff face. Very amazing. Chu Cheng was also stunned for a moment. In connection with the previous topic of her mother, the girl was probably answering the question, you live alone now. She meant that she lives with her mother now, not alone. It sounds like a single parent family. But Chu Cheng immediately remembered another thing. When I used Batman to access the database of the Special Service 9th Division yesterday, I was a little concerned, so I casually searched for Fana's information. All I saw was some relatively basic file information, and the column for mental evaluation also said currently stable, but needs further observation. There was not much to worry about. But Chu Cheng remembered it clearly. The information clearly stated that she was abandoned by her father before she could remember, and her mother passed away when she was 6 years old. She is an orphan. Thanks to the first hall owner of this book, 930, for the reward. Although there is no plan to increase the number of chapters for awards, I still think it would be better to give it to the big guys than the first order is about 2500 at present. Thank you brothers for your subscription support. Although it is estimated that the first order may not reach 4000 by 12 o'clock tonight, no matter how much it can reach in the end, it will be better to guarantee for tomorrow. Thanks again to the brothers who subscribed. Chapter 90 Orphanage. This episode made Chu Cheng feel a little strange, but he didn't ask any questions. Before they parted, Huang Liping politely said that you and our little Cheng live close to each other and are colleagues, so you can visit each other more often and take care of each other in work and life. These were all very ordinary polite words, but Fana's little face looked particularly serious when she heard them. I don't know if it was an illusion, but Chu Cheng seemed to feel that the girl was still standing at the fork in the back after they parted, watching them leave, until they had disappeared in the crowd and couldn't see each other's appearance. When they turned their heads, Chu Cheng seemed to still feel her fixed gaze. This girl is pretty good, isn't she? Huang Liping said with a smile. What's good about her? Fana's appearance is indeed hard to find fault with, but her temperament gives people a weird feeling, and she is a bit frugal with words. After a meal, she said far more phrases than complete sentences, which seemed a bit unnatural. Mom didn't think there was anything wrong. She thought that being less talkative was a proof of being honest and well behaved. But Chu Cheng felt the opposite. He was still wondering if there was a misunderstanding, or if the other party deliberately lied to them that she was living with her mother. But in fact, she was the only one in the family's household registration book. But when she mentioned her mother, her eyes suddenly lit up, and it seemed that she was not lying. That would be even more terrifying. Whether it was a supernatural development that she really lived with her mother who had been dead for many years, or an Arkham-like development that her mother was just an illusion in her brain, it made people feel quite dangerous. But anyway, since she passed the mental evaluation at the mental hospital, and Miyazaki seemed to guarantee that she was very stable, Chu Cheng could only say that he hoped they really knew what they were doing. However, Chu still thought it was wise to keep a distance from such unstable factors. Taking my mother to stroll around the business district was considered as a follow-up activity for today, and I also bought her some clothes by the way. There is no other advantage to working in a mental hospital, except that there is a lot of money, and the salary income for hanging up in the back row is not low. It's impossible to buy a house or a car overnight, but it's still possible to treat my mother to a meal and buy her some clothes. Huang Liping didn't say it, but she couldn't hide her joy. The feeling of a mother receiving a gift from her child is hard to compare. Chu Cheng had originally checked online and found that there was a dessert shop with a good reputation, but when he walked here, he found that there was another long queue, so he had to give up. These days, when you go out, the queues for food, drinks, and desserts are as long as the women's restroom in the tourist center of a scenic spot, and they often start at an hour and there is no upper limit. After eating and drinking and walking around, Chu Cheng felt that the blue bar was almost full. After returning to the apartment, he sat in front of the computer and logged in again. When he went online again, the DNA comparison results extracted from the Yoshimura couple's home last night had come out, and a match was found. It was indeed a child. Rhea Hadder, 12 years old. She was arrested for burglary and had a criminal record at the Public Security Bureau, so the DNA data was recorded in the Public Security Bureau's system. She has no parents or immediate family members. Her registration records show that she was an orphan in an orphanage in the south of the city. The records show that she was found on a grassy field in the suburbs. A couple drove by in the middle of the night and heard her crying. Fortunately, the couple was quite brave. They were not scared away in the dark. Instead, they got out of the car with a flashlight and walked in the direction of the crying. Then they found her. Her growth was not smooth. Chu Cheng saw only the record of her burglary a year ago in the file at first glance, but in fact, this was not the first time. Leia has been an absolute problem child since she was a child. She has committed theft, fighting, and fraud. She has a wide range of interests and is not picky about food. But even so, she was adopted from an orphanage a year ago. Although her adoptive parents, Mr. and Mrs. Jordan, are not very rich, their conditions can be considered middle class even in a city like Jiangdu. They can't say that they can treat her completely as their own daughter, but they are definitely not bad. But such days did not last forever. Some time ago, the Jordan couple mysteriously disappeared on the same night. The sheriff's office quickly arrived at the scene to investigate, but failed to find any clues. All the doors and windows of the house were locked, and there was no damage or signs of entry. The two seemed to have evaporated into thin air, and their whereabouts have not been found so far. No relatives were willing to accept and raise the child, so Lana once again returned to the orphanage, where she grew up. Until a month ago, she also disappeared. The investigation records of the sheriff's office showed that it was a case almost as strange as the disappearance of her adoptive parents, and the sheriff in charge of the investigation also scratched his head and couldn't figure out what happened. The incident also happened overnight, in a large dormitory where 8 children lived together. 8 children, that is, there were 7 people in the room besides the missing Rhea. But none of the 7 people noticed anything wrong, and they were only surprised to find that one person was missing from the room when they woke up in the morning. The night guard guaranteed that no living person had entered the building throughout the night, and the sheriff didn't think anyone could take a 12-year-old girl away from the room without alerting anyone. And the remaining children also said that the door was still locked when they got up in the morning. The investigation records show that there has been no progress in the case so far, and the girl is still missing. But Chu Cheng clearly scanned her DNA information from the Yoshimura couple's home, indicating that she had at least appeared there. Chu Cheng thought about it and decided to go to the orphanage first. The location of the orphanage is relatively remote compared to the urban area. Chu Cheng has never been to such a place in reality, and his impression of orphanages is still in movies, TV shows, and books. And this time, although he was still remotely controlling Batman in front of the computer, he must admit that what he saw was still impressive. It was completely different from what he imagined. As a place where a group of children live, there is no warmth and sunshine here, and the first impression it gives is more like Arkham. Yes, this is really the first impression of this building. When Batman on the screen landed outside the door, the iron gate was only locked, and the thick and old chain was wrapped around the door like a snake. There was no one in the empty yard, and the cold wind blew through the branches, like the whisper of ghosts. The light in the yard is quite bad, reminiscent of a horror movie with a 10-level hell filter. From the orientation and layout of the yard, it can be seen that the daytime lighting should also be very bad, and it is very likely that there will be no sunlight all year round. Literally, a corner where the sun does not shine. Entering this building is easier than imagined. The guard in the security booth next to the gate of the yard was reading a newspaper with his legs crossed, and the guard at the bottom of the building was watching short videos on his mobile phone. In addition, From the yard to the building, the whole place was deserted, and there was almost no sign of living people. Batman passed silently through the corridor. As usual, he relied on the perspective of the detective mode to avoid being seen, but Chu Cheng once doubted that it was unnecessary. Because even if the full map perspective of the detective mode was turned on, the corridors in front, behind, left and right were basically empty. When passing a classroom, he noticed that there were some children in it. But it was not like an ordinary school or kindergarten. If there was no one to watch them for a while, they would want to make a fuss in the classroom. Here, it was just the opposite. In a classroom with more than a dozen children, they were terribly quiet. There were children sitting in the corner, rolling their eyes and drooling. There were also children staring at the blackboard in a daze, twitching from time to time, and making two weird laughs. And those who looked normal also looked gloomy and weird. Or maybe being mentally sound has become a curse here, because then you have to learn how to accept reality day by day. Batman found the target dormitory. Raya's bed was still empty, but there were other children living in the dormitory, and after so much time, most of the clues and traces that might have been left were now gone. He was about to start scanning, but soon he noticed the movement outside through the detective mode. Someone was coming this way. The sheriff's department is still investigating, but they also say that the chances are slim. It was a man's voice. If you want to see it yourself, her bed is over here. But the sheriff's department has come to see it several times, and it's been a long time. I don't think there will be anything else to find. Batman got out of the window before they entered the door and stood on a bulge outside the building, close to the wall. Chu Cheng secretly observed from Batman's perspective, and the facial recognition in detective mode quickly recognized who the person was. The man who spoke was named Zeliang Teo, the director of this orphanage, and the one who came with him was Fana. Thanks to the first owner of this book, Jiudianban 1, for the reward. Although there is no plan to increase the number of rewards, I think it would be better to give the big boss one. Then the current first order is about 2,500. Thank you brothers for your subscription support. Although it is estimated from the current increase that the first order may not reach 4,000 by 12 o'clock tonight. No matter how much the final result is, it will be better to guarantee for tomorrow. Thanks again to the brothers who subscribed. Chapter 91 The Forgotten Land. The person who walked into the dormitory was indeed Fana, the girl from the 9th place, who had just had dinner with Chu Cheng during the day. But at that time she was still wearing a white dress, like a blooming lotus. But now she has changed into a black dress, a dress with a gothic style, white lace edges, exuding a girl's innocence, but at the same time, mixed with a certain weird gloom. She came to Leia's bed without saying a word, and began to look through the things left here. 8 beds were crammed into a small single room, and it is conceivable that the space occupied by each person is very limited. Naturally, there can't be too many personal belongings in such a small space. The girl found a thick book from the shelf, a planting manual for seedling maintenance. She reached out and gently stroked the cover, carefully opened the book, and was mesmerized for a while. We are applying to build a library, said Deansay. Of course, this is not easy. There are huge problems in terms of procedures and funding. But we all think it is necessary for children. Books are the best channel for them to contact the outside world and enrich their spiritual world. This book, Fana said, closing the book gently. I gave it to her. Deansay was stunned. I don't know. You and Raya. The only friend. Fana stared at the book in her hand absent-mindedly for a while, and added, once. Oh, okay, I don't know. Deansay said apologetically, if I had known that Raya was your friend, I would definitely contact you as soon as something happened. We used to be friends. She said softly, we haven't contacted each other for a long time. She carefully put the book back in place. The Public Security Bureau is still investigating. If there is any progress, I will contact you immediately. Thank you. The two began to walk out. Deansay smiled like a kind elder and patted the girl on the shoulder. Why are you being polite? He said with a smile. Although you are no longer here, you know that our door is always open to you, and you are always welcome to come back. We are like your family. As the dean was talking, the two of them walked out of the corridor. Batman followed secretly. A series of pleasant bells echoed in the empty courtyard, which was a sign that dinner was about to begin. The aunts brought the children's dinner from the cafeteria to the classroom. They were huge silver metal buckets filled with a bucket of sticky white porridge with a few vegetable leaves floating on top. To be honest, it felt more like feed than dinner. Chu Cheng couldn't imagine how he could endure living in such a place. Even if he wasn't really there, he could feel the deadness of this courtyard through the screen. But it wasn't the fault of the infection. Although he really wanted to blame the deadness and coldness here on a source of infection, it was a pity that it was not an infection source or an evil ancient existence that made this place look like this, but human beings themselves. This place has always been like this, since a long time ago, long before the infection spread, just like many other forgotten corners in this world. When he saw Fanna here, he remembered that he seemed to have found in the girl's file last night that she lived in an orphanage before joining the Special Service Section 9, but the basic information did not specify where or what orphanage it was. Now that he remembered this question, he operated Batman to access the system of Section 9 and took a look. He was sure that it was this place in front of him. Fanna grew up in this orphanage. It was not until she was discovered to have the physique of a special person and joined the Special Service Section 9 that she left. She knew the missing girl named Rhea. Chu Cheng noticed that there was a black car parked outside the door. It should be the car of the Special Service Section 9. Chu Cheng guessed that it might be a car and driver specially assigned to her by Section 9, which was considered a benefit for her and also made it easier to keep track of her movements. The girl said goodbye to the dean and walked out, and the iron door closed again behind her. The guard made a clanking sound when locking the iron chain. The huge steel door was like a cold barrier, isolating this forgotten corner from the world. Fanna stopped in front of the door, turned her head, and looked at the yard behind her for a moment, then walked to the side of the car waiting outside. The driver started the engine in advance when he saw her, but the girl did not get in the car. She walked to the side of the cab, leaned over and whispered something to the driver. The driver showed a confused expression, but nodded and turned off the engine again. He continued to wait here, and the girl turned around and began to walk along the outer wall of the orphanage. Chu Cheng also felt a little strange. Judging from the direction she was heading, it seemed that she wanted to go somewhere behind the orphanage, but the address here was remote, and there was an undeveloped wasteland behind it. That direction was overgrown with weeds, and no one had taken care of it for many years. It was completely dominated by plants. But she seemed to know something. Chu Cheng thought about it, and controlled Batman to keep up. The girl walked through the grass and bushes as tall as a person. She seemed to know exactly where she was going. After walking for an unknown amount of time, Chu Cheng finally saw the place she was looking for. A natural cave. She carefully entered the cave and groped down in the pitch black darkness. Such an environment happened to provide a perfect cover for Batman. He followed behind at a certain distance, almost blending into the darkness. The small entrance could barely accommodate one person. The experience of entering from here might not be very pleasant. After all, it was narrow and crowded. But as the saying goes, a few dozen steps will open up, and after entering, you will find that there is a different world inside. Chu Cheng was a little surprised when he scanned its internal structure through the detective mode. He didn't expect that such a world would be hidden in this overgrown place. But the scan in the detective mode also found that they were not the only visitors in this cave. At first, it was completely dark when entering from the entrance, but Fanna slid along the entrance to the inside, and soon light began to appear in front of him. When she reached the bottom and landed on the uneven ground, the orange-red light of the fire hit her face. In the huge space, where stones and soil were mixed, green vines covered the stone walls around the cave. Torches were tied to the hard stone walls by intricate vines. The light of the fire flickered, and the human figures on the stone walls were projected like rugged ghosts. A figure walked out of the shadow in front of the cave. "You are finally back." The girl in the shadow was pale, and looked even more lifeless under the flickering light of the torch. Rhea had her, the girl who disappeared from the orphanage. She looked at Fanna, and showed a weird smile that seemed to be completely inappropriate for her age. "I guess it must be difficult to find this dirty corner from such a beautiful place." Chapter 92 Countless Love. In the past, behind the Holy Cross orphanage, deep in the cave, Fana removed the branches and weeds used to camouflage the cave and groped into the bottomless darkness. She held a small flashlight in her hand, and the flashlight pierced into the endless darkness like a sharp sword, as if lost in it. The flashlight found a child with his head buried in his knees in the corner at the bottom of the cave. Rhea had raised her head from her knees and raised her hand to block the dazzling flashlight. "Eat," Fana said. Rhea still had no intention of getting up. She pouted and shook her head. Fana turned off the flashlight and sat down beside her in the dark. The two girls sat in silence in the dark for a while until Rhea broke the silence. "I don't want to go back," she said in a low voice. "I hate that place and everyone there." Fana didn't say anything, but just touched her head gently. "I like it here." The irritability in Rhea's voice was slightly reduced. "It's quiet here. There aren't so many annoying people. This is their secret base. They are the only ones who have discovered this place in the entire orphanage. They carefully camouflaged the entrance with branches and bushes so that other children would not find it. Of course, even if they didn't disguise it, the chance of being discovered is not great. There are only half of the children in the entire yard who are mentally normal, and many of the other half are disabled. Among the few remaining children, there are basically only the two of them who sneak out from time to time, and no one else will find this place." Rhea raised her head and looked in the direction of Fana in the dark. "We will always be friends, right?" "Point yeah." The girl gently stroked her head, as if she were treating her own sister. "Yes, at this moment. Now, I thought you had forgotten about this place a long time ago," said Rhea. "I guess the accident at the store owned by Yoshimura contacted me, right? When I noticed that you happened to be at the scene of the accident, I thought of this possibility. But how did you connect me to Yoshimura?" "Neighbors," said Fana softly, "saw them." "A neighbor saw me? I guess it was Aunt Lee who talks a lot." Rhea shrugged. "I only stayed at Yoshimura's house for a few days. I tried my best to be careful not to show up, but I didn't expect someone to see me. Earlier today, when the investigators from the 9th Bureau were investigating near Yoshimura's house, a neighbor mentioned that a little girl seemed to have entered and left the house 2 days before the Yoshimura couple disappeared. As far as the neighbors knew, the couple had no children." Fana heard about this. She went to the neighbor's house in person in the afternoon to ask about the child's appearance and soon associated it with her old friend in the orphanage. So she came here, the place where she grew up. "Look at you. Pretty face, exquisite clothes. You are already a princess, right?" Leia said sarcastically. "I guess it must be difficult for you to come back to this place for a stinky rat like me." "I didn't. I bet that old guy Zaliangteo must be very respectful to you now. If necessary, he would like to kneel down and lick your black stockings." Leia seemed to not want to listen to her at all. "Because you are now a decent person, you have become a white swan, and naturally you can't be with us forgotten ugly ducklings. You know, I have seen you. I have seen what you look like outside. Living in a single family apartment in the most prosperous center of the city, beautiful clothes, and a special car to pick you up. The old guy used to look at us as if he was looking at mold, but now he has to worship you. I bet you feel much better now, right, Fana? Ha, if you want to say that you have been donating money to make your conscience feel better, I know." Leia was unmoved. "I don't care what the old guy promised that this place will be like in the future. But we all know that it is an illusion." Leia's eyes were cold. "I know, and you know it deep down in your heart. We are all abandoned people, and we have been like this since we were born. Our lives are destined to be a lonely straight line. Even if we occasionally intersect with someone, we will eventually be abandoned again. Because this is our truest appearance. Maybe you can use money and status to whitewash yourself, and maybe others will hypocritically cooperate with you and tell you that you are important. You can also spend a lot of money to make this cursed place more glamorous. But no matter how hard you try to immerse yourself in that illusion, you will never be able to fill yourself. Because we are born like this. We are born with gaps." Fana was silent for a moment. "You were adopted?" she suddenly asked. "Why?" "Glad to hear you mention this." Rhea smiled. "Yes, that experience is very important to me. At that time, I did naively think that the gap could be filled. I really thought so. But I soon found out that I was wrong. They felt that I owed them for being adopted, and I could never meet their requirements. I think they might just be impulsive, and it didn't take long for them to lose their initial enthusiasm. I overheard them seriously discussing sending me back to this place. At that time, I knew that some things are born with us, like a curse. No matter how much you hate it, you can't get rid of it. After a pause, she changed the subject, and a creepy smile appeared on her childish face. But it was during that period that I learned a more important lesson. She smiled and said, God took away what we were born with, and we have no choice but to learn to take it back ourselves. Look, like this. Fana noticed the figure walking out of the shadows of the fire on both sides. From their bodies, it was vaguely clear that they were a man and a woman, with twisted bones and bloated bodies, and bloodshot eyes in their eye sockets, which looked shocking. Come and meet my parents, the Jordans. Rhea smiled brightly. Look, they love me from the bottom of their hearts now. Fana glanced at them. What did you do? Rhea did not answer the question directly. Do you remember? I talked to you more than once before. I said why there is so much love in the world. Everyone has it, but only we don't have it. But that doesn't matter anymore. The girl grinned, revealing an even more weird and creepy smile under the flickering firelight. At the same time, Fana noticed that more pairs of eyes were lit up in the shadows on all sides of the cave. Men and women with twisted bodies, some walking and some crawling, walked out of the darkness into the firelight one after another. Countless shadows were cast on the stone walls and the ground by torches, as if woven into a dark net to protect Rhea in the center. Look. The girl's smile became even brighter. Now, I have countless loves. Chapter 93 Tree Fortress. In fact, as early as when Fana was reuniting with his old friends, Chu Cheng had already turned around and ran away with Batman. Of course, it was not to flee from the battlefield, nor was it that he habitually skipped the plot dialogue and went straight to the action stage. In fact, if possible, Chu Cheng did not consider skipping the classic villain Q&A stage and going up to be defeated, but he took advantage of the time when the other party was talking to hide in the dark and continue to scan the environment in detective mode, and as a result, he made some other discoveries. First of all, before entering the cave, he noticed a group of infected people hiding in the dark. It was estimated that they were in a similar situation to the Yoshimura couple. The common point of this wave of infected people is that they regard Rhea as their own child and reject and attack all those who they think will take the child away from them. Originally, it was easy to think that Rhea might be the source of infection in this incident from this performance, but on second thought, it seemed that there was still a little problem. It was also discovered before that the infection of this incident was spread through eating, and the infected person needed to eat specific objects to be affected by the infection. Although Chu Cheng has been either slacking off, or lying down since joining the asylum, he has read a lot of literature during this period to deepen his understanding and cognition of his work content as an agent. So he quickly concluded that this wave of events should be caused by a vector-type infection source, similar to the statue that was blown up in the clean building when he first attacked as Batman. What further consolidated his conjecture was the image he saw under the detective mode scan. He saw the roots spreading on the walls of the cave, and under the detective mode image, they had a similar infection source reaction to what he saw at the drain of the pool at the Yoshimura couple's home. It's just that this time the area seen under the detective vision is wider and the effect is stronger. And a closer look can also reveal that the vines and roots throughout the cave are spreading and twisting in the same direction, sinking deeper into the cave, pointing to something outside the cave. Maybe that direction is the source of infection and the source of the real threat. Something may be squatting deeper, staring at this cave. Chu Cheng can't allow this. He always stalks others, but never lets others stalk him. So he must catch the guy behind him. So he controlled Batman to quietly exit the cave and continue to move towards the depths of the jungle along the underground route system marked by the detective mode. Then he soon found the source, a giant tree. The best place to hide a tree is in the forest. It is precisely because of such a barren jungle that such a giant infection source is not noticeable. Chu Cheng did not let Batman rush in directly, but used the detective vision to scan and observe as usual, and found that this tree brother seemed to be really not easy to mess with. First of all, it is a bit big. If the malnourished trees around it look like toothpicks, then this guy is just like a massage stick standing among the toothpicks, standing out from the crowd. Secondly, it is not a real tree. If you don't look carefully, you won't find it. Once you scan it, you can see that there are a lot of vines spreading around this thing, but if you look closely, you will find that each one is actually a sticky and soft tentacle. Maybe it also thought that it would be a bit strange for a tree to have so many tentacles, so it hung some leaves on each of them as decoration, making it look a little more like a proper tree. That's not all. In addition, it also had densely packed black fruits under the branches. The black and strange shapes were covered with sticky liquid, which looked weird and evil at first glance. But they were not like this when they first appeared on Chu Cheng's screen. At first, the vines in the picture looked normal, and the fruits on the trees were all green, fat, and beautiful, and very tempting. But that was an illusion that deceived people's senses and aroused desire. People who saw these could easily not resist the temptation, and swallowed the fruits under instinct, mutating into infected people. The tentacles and liquid in the milk tea shop all came from this guy. Of course, this trick didn't work on Chu Cheng. After all, he was not at the scene through the network cable, so he couldn't feel the influence on people's spirit. At best, he could only feel the visual effect that looked delicious through Batman's perspective. As for the impact on Batman, it doesn't matter. First of all, the Master's own willpower is maximum, which naturally resists mental attacks. Secondly, the moment the built-in system of his battlesuit detects that his mental state is abnormal, a built-in program called Fireworks will be activated. It may be because the enthusiastic Gotham fans are very interested in Batman's world of thought. Mental manipulation, hypnosis and brainwashing are commonplace in Batman's career. Although he can successfully resist with the monster-level willpower written into the setting, it is well known that willpower is a kind of idealism after all. When it works well, it is really useful. It can make the Master's brain immune to all poisons. Professor X can only be crushed by the sentence "I'm Batman" when he travels through time. But when the plot kills, he often disappears directly, and the poison gas of the Scarecrow can knock him down. Therefore, facing the torture of these mental lunatics for many years, Batman not only has his own willpower, but also has a special module for mental defense in his battlesuit equipment. For example, the Fireworks system he activated now. The system design was inspired by games and TV shows where some color-changing visual effects are so stimulating that they may even cause epilepsy. The system can quickly switch patterns in the visual sensor of his helmet and use high-intensity color contrast or high-frequency flashing fluorescent patterns. And as the program runs, the picture will be repeatedly enlarged to stimulate his brain and quickly reset Batman's short-term memory. Of course, this will cause strong stimulation to his eyes and may also affect his mobility, but it is really effective in mental protection. It can help Batman get rid of hallucinations and see the real appearance again when he loses himself. So soon after being stimulated by the Fireworks system, the tender and juicy fruits on the screen disappeared and turned back to the black, ugly, and sticky appearance. That's why it is said that this tree is not very serious. It hangs fruits and dangles there, feeling like a poor ragged lady on the street, and then when you feel compassion and are ready to take her to the room for targeted poverty alleviation, as soon as the door is closed, several burly men suddenly jump out from behind and push you to the bed. The tree opposite may have also noticed that this mere human seemed to have escaped its bewitching spell, and the tentacles wrapped in leaves became restless and began to sweep towards Batman. Chu Cheng made a prompt decision, and Batman raised his hand and threw a dart at his face, which was nailed into the tree trunk with a snap. The red danger indicator light flashed twice, and the next second the dart exploded with a bang. If it were an ordinary tree, it would have collapsed directly after taking such an explosive bat dart, but this thing seemed to be particularly resistant to damage. After the explosive dart exploded, it only left a small gap on the trunk, and it quickly recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye. Two tentacles stabbed at him. Batman rolled to avoid it, and this time threw a throwing electric shocker. The stun gun also hit the target, but this weapon, that is always effective against humans, doesn't seem to work well on this tree. The electric current caused wood chips to fly, and a burning smell filled the trunk, but it still had little effect. Almost at the same moment, one of the tentacles wrapped around Batman's ankle. Fortunately, Batman and Chu Cheng reacted quickly enough. The QTE button prompt lit up on the screen almost the moment he was lifted upside down, which meant that Batman had reacted. Chu Cheng, who had been beaten and tempered by the most difficult single-player games, also pressed the button that popped up on the screen almost immediately. So Batman immediately took out an electrified bat dart, bent down and swung the dart, and the sharp blade attached to the electric current immediately cut the sharp blade that bound his ankle in half. Chu Cheng was quick-eyed and quick-handed. He immediately used the roll operation when Batman landed, and narrowly avoided the entanglement of two more tentacles. Chu Cheng soon discovered that this tree had strong defense and regeneration capabilities, and Batman's regular equipment could hardly hurt it. The vine tentacles were very fast and powerful, and more importantly, there were so many of them that one could be caught if not careful. Moreover, although this thing was called a tree, it actually seemed to have its own consciousness. When it was suppressed, its branches would rustle and tremble constantly in a specific pattern, and the entire trunk seemed to be twitching, as if mocking the insignificant human's arrogance. And what happened next was even more outrageous. Some of the ugly black fruits on the tree shook twice and unexpectedly broke away from the branches one after another and were fired at Batman like black grenades. Red parabolas were drawn in the air in the screen, and circle marks were opened one after another on the ground. That should be Batman's prediction of the trajectory of the opponent's throw, by relying on equipment technology or his own experience, helping players to see clearly in an intuitive way. Chu Cheng immediately controlled Batman to roll and dodge. Although he avoided all of them with his superb skills and reaction speed, the thing was still powerful, and the aftermath of some fruit explosions still blew Batman away. The armor of the battlesuit blocked most of the impact, but shocking blood red special effects still appeared around the screen. That is the special effect that appears when the hero character is hurt, and it is a warning to the player. The more eye-catching the special effect, the more serious the injury. More tentacles and fruits are coming. But Chu Cheng did not stop operating. Batman just landed and lay on the ground when he immediately raised the grappling gun and fired a shot in the direction of the way he came. Before the next fruit fell, the grappling fibers had already shrunk rapidly, pulling Batman's body in that direction. The fruit exploded almost close to the after image he shot out. Chu Cheng roughly saw it. This thing has high health and defense, and it also has its own health recovery. It has group attack, group control, and long-range bombing. It can only be said that some things look like a tree on the surface, but in fact they are a fortress behind the scenes. How about leaving this to Moon Knight or Captain America? At this stage, these two do have strong output, but after all, they are still melee systems. It is not easy to perform against such a guy who can bomb remotely and has a large number of tentacles. In addition, the opponent has high HP, high defense and can heal itself, so even if you get close to him, you may not be able to achieve any effect. Although Captain America once had a unique skill of grasping the robot's neck and trying to suffocate it, it is estimated that it may be difficult to use it against such a tree. Chu Cheng thought about it and had a better idea. Chapter 94. As the saying goes, the best strategy is to run away. Adhering to the spirit of if the enemy doesn't move, I will attack. If the enemy moves, I will run away. Chu Cheng turned around and ran. Of course, Batman's case can't be called running, that's called tactical retreat. I have to go back to the city immediately. Yes, Batman still has the skill of returning to the city, but the cooldown time is a little long. After using it, about 20 seconds later, the Batplane will fly over the sky. Batman raised his hand and fired a grappling hook to grab the bottom of the plane. The whole person flew into the air and quickly left the battlefield and returned to his fighter plane. Chu Cheng had tested this skill of returning to the city before. Most of the time, a plane suddenly came to pick up Batman like this, and then the Batplane flew higher and higher until it disappeared into the clouds. Then a small circle with a bat mark appeared on the screen and rotated for a while. After a while, the scene changed to the Batcave, and the black steel raptor flew in from outside the cave and landed on the tarmac. This cutscene effect of returning to the city once made Chu Cheng suspect that the Batman in this game might have built a mobile Batcave in the air. This kind of lazy donkey, the behavior of the airbase that deserves a beating, made Chu Cheng feel a little uneasy. After all, the fate of things flying in the sky is usually either to hoe the land or to turn into the most gorgeous fireworks in the sky. It may also be that those souls bound by gravity will inevitably feel homesick after floating in the sky for a long time. Even the Justice League Watchtower, which is full of gods, cannot escape this curse. However, after more tests, he found that Batman does not have to fly a plane to return to the city. Occasionally, he will summon the Batmobile in the suburbs, and he may summon a submarine in the water. Then, no matter whether he flies, runs or swims, he can always return to the Batcave after a cutscene. So Chu Cheng probably discovered it. Just like some people say that all roads lead to Rome, for me, all roads may lead to the Batcave. This wave of returning to the city is certainly not a simple tactical escape, but this time the opponent made Chu Cheng suddenly remember something he saw when browsing the Batcave armory, so he made a special trip back to the city to change equipment. There is an old saying that you can fight Batman, but never make an appointment with Batman. After completing the equipment replacement, Batman returned to the apron from the armory and boarded the plane. The Black Raptor took off again under the propulsion generated by the plasma flame. Next is the second round. Seeing that the Bat monster ran away after only 2 rounds, Brother Tree was also very disdainful, and the branches and leaves rustled and shook continuously as if mocking. But unexpectedly, he came back in just a few minutes. A residual image swooped down from the sky, and when it fell to the middle of the air, it suddenly opened its cloak and glided down like a giant bat. Batman put away his cloak and rolled to relieve the impact. When he stood up, he was standing in front of the tentacle tree again. The tentacle tree was immediately happy. Just now, I thought I was lucky to run away, but I didn't expect that I would come back to give myself a head after finally escaping. Since the opponent is so crazy about trying to kill himself, if it doesn't cooperate, won't people think that it is a coward? So without saying anything, it thrust out several more tentacles, sweeping towards Batman's limbs. But this time Batman did not dodge, but walked towards the tree with big strides, while calmly raising his right hand, and a large cloud of white water mist sprayed out from under his glove. Tentacle tree. What is this? Human herbicide? What a joke. I'm the king of trees. How can I be defeated by a mere herbicide? Tentacle tree. The power of this time is obviously far beyond the imagination of Brother Tree. The weeds on the ground immediately wilted when they touched this thing, and the vine tentacles of the tentacle tree also wilted after breaking through the layer of water mist, and when they touched Batman's body, they were completely powerless and followed the sage mode and drooped to the ground. The tentacle tree did not believe in evil and thrust out 2 more tentacles. But Batman still raised his hand in a normal way, and a cloud of water sprayed out again. Then the 2 tentacles also withered, and even the bushes and flowers next to them withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. Tentacle tree. Outrageous. This transvestite human is outrageous. Batman certainly couldn't use ordinary herbicides, but his homemade invincible bat herbicide. Well, this is a problem that the master has had since his early years. It's like if you add a bad prefix to anything, it will immediately become tall and majestic, such as the Batmobile, Batplane, Batrike, Batcane, Batbicycle. Of course, some of the above are nonsense, but this bat herbicide does have a history. To talk about the origin of this thing, we have to mention one of the classic old members of the Batman fan support group, Pamela Riley, aka Poison Ivy. Poison Ivy is also an old Arkham person. In addition to her thin waist, long legs, big breasts and bottomless depths, her biggest personality label should be an extreme environmentalist. But unlike the internationally famous double standard environmentalist, Poison Ivy's philosophy is a firm plants are supreme, and humans are dead type. She can't be persuaded by reason or money, so she has her own exclusive VIP suite in Arkham. A big difference from other Gotham lunatics is that Poison Ivy really has superpowers. She can control mentally and plants. When she is awesome, she can even raise the entire Gotham to the ground with her plants. Batman has naturally prepared a lot of countermeasures after competing with opponents of this level for many years, and his bat herbicide is one of them. This thing is exclusively formulated by the Wayne Group and has a lethal effect on all plants. It is a special medicine specially prepared by the master for poison ivy. In fact, when Chu Cheng first found this thing in the bat cave, his first reaction was, why did the master put some weird things in the arsenal again? Isn't this just a special attack version of a bat shark repellent? I didn't expect that there would be such a day when it would really work. Poor brother Shu has never seen such a cruel thing. It now thinks that the human in front of it is a bit weird. As the saying goes, deliver a package under Big Ben, put it up, and send it down. This tree looks very tall and mighty, but it is actually a coward who bullies the weak and fears the strong. Seeing that the situation is not good and feels that it has to send it, it comes to the conclusion that it will directly open it. That's right, it actually ran away with such a big tree. The whole tree drilled out from the ground with great momentum, and the roots inserted at the bottom were pulled out in one breath. Countless roots gathered together and turned into two wooden legs, holding the thick trunk and turning around to run away. While running, the tentacles were dancing wildly. It's just that such a small pair of legs are running with such a thick trunk. The picture looks a bit inconsistent, no matter how you look at it. Chu Cheng. The final first order was 3600. It's a pity that it didn't reach 4000. Hahaha. But there are still 4 updates today. Please subscribe and vote for the monthly ticket. Chapter 95. Why do I have such a dream? Although it was known that this tree was not a proper tree, Chu Cheng did not expect that it could still run. However, considering its size, its short legs were a bit too tight. It had to bear a weight that it should not bear, and its running speed was not very fast. At this point, Chu Cheng naturally could not let it run away and controlled Batman to chase it directly. Of course, the tentacle tree did not forget to fight back while running and threw a bunch of fruits from the tree to bombard it, trying to stop Batman's pursuit. But on Chu Cheng's side, the screen could clearly see the trajectory predicted by Batman. With his flexible operation and Batman's extraordinary skills, all the explosions were avoided. This made Chu Cheng couldn't help but think of the ordinary human label that the editor forced on the master. Although ordinary people seem to be part of the master's setting, it is reasonable to say that the series of difficult actions that he jumped up and down and rolled in the air on the screen, those 18-line superhumans may not be able to do it. As for those endless tentacles, they are no longer a threat after the bat herbicide is added here. The style of this ugly country comic is very weird. Unlike in the works of the island country, you might think that the tentacle monster is a magical girl quality inspector, but on the other side of the ocean, the various tentacle monsters here seem to be more interested in American-style muscular men with tights than beautiful girls. As a representative of the popular first-line characters, the master naturally often rushes to the front line of the persecution of tentacles. He has rich experience in dealing with such things. His skills of dodging and breaking free from tentacles are maximum. So I saw a huge tree in the jungle waving vines all over the sky and throwing fruits at the back while walking with short legs, being chased by a bad transvestite lunatic and running around in the woods. At first glance, the picture is both a bit weird and a bit funny. Tentacle tree, don't come over here. But even if it became a spirit, its legs were still too short. Its short legs could not bear the weight that it was not supposed to bear. Even if it wanted to run, it could not run. Seeing that it could not run, the giant tree suddenly became timid and simply took root again, looking like it was pissed off. Damn, if the tiger does not show its power, you think I'm a sick cat, right? Do you really think I'm afraid of a transvestite lunatic like you? Batman raised his hand and sprayed a large group of tentacles with a spray. He rolled to avoid the bombardment of 2 fruits and quickly moved closer to the tree trunk. Then he threw out another oval metal object. With a loud bang, the metal object exploded from the inside out. The invisible microwave energy exploded almost close to the tree trunk, and a large area of branches withered instantly. The fruits shrank and fell to the ground, and a large area on the trunk also dried up quickly at a speed visible to the naked eye. Tentacle tree. What the hell is this? It is also one of the special weapons against poison ivy that Chu Cheng found in the Batcave, the dehydration bomb. Its function is somewhat similar to the microwave weapon developed by the Wayne Group in the movie Batman Begins for large-scale evaporation of water sources, except that this one has a smaller and more precise range, and it is a special version for plants. The effect is also simple and crude. That is, it can quickly dehydrate the target plant that is it. Because it is a special attack version for plants, the effect may be discounted if it is used on organisms, but it is also effective. So when necessary, it can also serve as a happy bomb for Aquaman. Dehydration is the enemy of almost all plants. Although this tree is big and strong, and can still withstand it, the effect of this bomb still makes it terrified. As a tree, it may feel like it has fucked Zion, and somehow it has provoked such a plague god. In its eyes, the transvestite human in front of it has already turned into a fierce and evil spirit, and it can be called the most evil public enemy of the tree world. Compared with him, Bald Kang is a good person. WDNM, my floor is shaking, I don't want to play anymore. So the tree brother who had just taken root and stood up immediately turned his head again. The courage he had just accumulated to fight to the death was immediately wiped out under the power of a small dehydration bomb. I saw that its roots, that had not even had time to reach the bottom, were pulled out again and turned into two short legs again, and turned his head and ran again with a huge trunk. Of course, with its short legs, that were better than nothing, and barely above 0 speed. In fact, the result might not make any difference whether it ran or fought to the death. It can be said that as a tree, its fate was actually doomed from the moment it hit Batman. So after another short and futile resistance, it cracked. On the other side, in the cave behind the orphanage, the infected were lying on the ground in a mess, looking particularly terrifying under the dim light of the torch. Fana, wearing a black dress, stood in the dim orange light, her face pale and cold. The woman in red stood silently beside her with her hair disheveled, and the shadow on the wall kept rising and falling with the changing firelight. Rhea Hadder stood at the other side of the infected people who were lying all over the ground, looking at the red figure beside Fana with a shocked face. "What are you?" she murmured in disbelief. Just in that brief moment, she saw the movement of that thing with her own eyes. But because she saw it with her own eyes, she found it even more difficult to understand. The movement was like dancing, as gorgeous as a rose. Her movements were slow and graceful, and when she moved, it seemed as if her body was light and weightless, as unreal as a dream, but as deadly as the god of death. She watched all the infected people in front of her being knocked down one after another in ways she could not understand. In front of the woman in red, it seemed as easy as cutting leeks. In just a short while, she became alone again. But the surprise was only so short-lived, and Rhea's emotions were stable. "I didn't expect that. Now I understand why you can walk out of here." She smiled. "You are very special, I can see that. It's over." Fana stood behind the woman in red. Her temperament was like a noble queen. "It's over? Ha ha ha, you seem to have made a mistake." Rhea laughed. "Just beat them, it doesn't matter." I said, "I'm no longer lacking love now, and I have as many substitutes as I want. That person brought me seeds, and I planted them here. I watched it take root and sprout, and it gave me everything I needed. Although this was not planned, I will let you see its true face. Fana, my mother, my guardian tree, I call it, Holy Sky Tree." When she said the last part, her tone suddenly rose an octave. The scene should look like the moment in the movie when the atmosphere is set. It should have shaken the earth and cracked the cave in an instant, and then a towering ancient tree with a terrifying and grotesque body and countless tentacles that make people's sanity crazy rose from the ground, but it didn't. The fact is, nothing happened. Leia was stunned for a moment. Then she thought that maybe she opened it in the wrong way, so she took a deep breath, changed her pose, snapped her fingers and shouted, "Appear, my guardian tree, Holy Sky Tree." She felt that the first shout was not good, so she shouted again. However, nothing happened. A gust of wind seemed to blow in from the direction of the cave entrance, causing the fire to sway twice, and the atmosphere was a bit awkward for a while. Impossible. Leia seemed to sense something in her mind, and her face was full of shock again. And this time the shock was far more exaggerated than when she saw the action of the red-clothed phantom just now, which was at the level of shattering her worldview and doubting her life. Through the subtle connection between herself and the guardian tree she mentioned, she seemed to sense what happened on the other side. The mother of Holy Sky Tree lost to a bad transvestite lunatic? Why did I have such a dream? Question mark? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96 Seed Spreader. Leia didn't understand, and couldn't understand. Where is my holy sky tree? What about the big one guardian tree? In the last second, she was still arrogantly showing off her new mother to her former bestie, but in this second, she came to her senses, and was immediately shocked. This person was pretending to be cool in the front, but he never expected that his mother in the back row was stolen by a madman dressed as a bat. It was carelessness that lost her own mother. The key is that the guardian tree is synonymous with invincibility in her impression. She once believed that all living things are ants in front of her invincible mother tree. She even thought of the script of the mother tree taking her to punch the Nansha nursing home and kick the BH kindergarten. Who would have thought that she would die before she could accomplish her mission? This great plan didn't even have time to be put into practice, and her mother was gone. Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. Leia was still immersed in the horror of her shattered worldview and shattered fantasy, but before she had time to digest the facts, she saw that the phantom in red was already within reach. A bloodless slender hand emerged from under the red dress, as cold as steel, but as strong as a pair of pliers. She grabbed Rhea's throat and lifted her off the ground with one hand. Her slender 5 fingers almost deformed her throat. Rhea felt as if her breathing was cut off. She saw Fana approaching her in the dim and flickering firelight, and her light blue eyes were filled with a strange emptiness. It was at this moment that Rhea suddenly realized something that terrified her. The girl in front of her, her former best friend, really wanted to kill her. Fana, you want to give me? She really couldn't say the second half of the sentence, and her whole face was distorted by suffocation. Fana looked at the girl in front of her who was held in the hand of her phantom. She was also the friend she once cherished the most. Unlike many people think, she did not forget everything that happened here after leaving the orphanage. She remembered everything, especially every bit with this only friend. She clearly remembered how they sneaked out of the compound to play together, and how they discovered the cave behind together. She remembered how they shared books, stories, comforted each other, and became each other's pillars of support during the hellish days. She remembered everything. But that couldn't change anything. Phantom's hand seemed to clench a little tighter, and his 5 fingers almost seemed to be embedded in Rhea's skin. Rhea's consciousness began to blur. You're breaking the law. Fana said seriously. Infected. Eliminate. But she didn't immediately give the final blow, but took out a small device from somewhere. It was a portable handheld scanning device equipped by Professor Miyazaki for field agents. It can roughly but quickly test the infection level of the infected to determine whether to eliminate them. The agents of the 9th Bureau may have no choice but to fight back when they are besieged and threatened by the infected. However, once the infected are subdued or give up resistance, they must be scanned with an instrument before execution. Only when the infection level of the other party is confirmed to be above 40% can they be killed on the spot at their discretion. This is the charter and rules of field agents, and Fana has always strictly followed the rules. She thought that Rhea, who had controlled so many people, must be a high-risk infected person. She was ready to kill her on the spot, but after scanning with a handheld device, the reading on the monitor was unexpected. The infection level reading on the monitor was 0. Fana tilted her head and looked at Rhea, who was lifted in the air and had fainted, with some surprise. She was not infected. The red-clothed phantom let go of her hand, and the girl fell softly to the ground. She began to cough violently, greedily breathing the turbid air mixed with death in the cave. You are not. Fana looked down at Rhea, who was coughing violently, an infected person. In other words, everything Rhea did was out of her own will, and all of this was what she wanted. Rhea coughed violently for a while, and finally recovered a little. I just want something that everyone else has. Her face was still ugly, making her look particularly weird. Is this wrong? No. While Fana was speaking, the phantom lifted Rhea up again, but this time he grabbed her wrist. She walked forward, took out a pair of black handcuffs, and buckled them on the girl's wrists. But you broke the law, she said seriously. Leia. Leia suddenly shuddered. She thought she had changed, became strong, had power, dared to pursue what she desired, and was also so unfamiliar that she was afraid of herself. But she was wrong. Now that she has lost everything, she realized that she has not changed at all. She is still the little kid who was forgotten in the corner, crying helplessly, longing for someone to hear her voice. Instead, it was Fana. She suddenly felt that Fana in front of her made her feel strange. The Special Service Division 9 arrived at the scene quickly and set up a long cordon behind the orphanage. After roughly understanding what happened, Agent Xiang Zuantong, who rushed to the scene from the Jiangdu branch of the Special Service Division 9, couldn't help but cast an admiring look at Fana, who was standing quietly aside. She found the culprit alone, solved so many infected people, and took down the enemy single-handedly. No wonder Professor Miyazaki praised her. They soon found the real source of infection in the deeper part of the jungle, the giant tentacle tree that had died. When the 9 found it, the tree was already riddled with holes. The trunk was dry and lifeless, and broken branches and vines were everywhere. When Rhea saw this miserable scene, she couldn't help but rush over, crying and saying, "Mom, you died tragically," which stunned the agents present. Later, the whole story was roughly figured out, and the analyst also roughly figured out what this thing was after investigation. Based on the existing signs and the analysis of the corpses, it is speculated that it should be a plant-based infection source with relatively weak infection ability. It can only infect the target if its fruit and body parts enter the human digestive system. However, relatively speaking, the infection source itself has outstanding capabilities. It has been found that its exterior is very tough, and conventional ammunition is difficult to cause effective damage. Weapons such as high explosive grenades or individual rocket launchers can penetrate the shell and cause damage, but the target should still have self-healing abilities similar to those of the infected, and ordinary injuries can be self-repaired quickly. In addition, it will use vine tentacles to capture targets, and the fruits on the tree are suspected to be explosives, which can be thrown and detonated under the control of the infection source's own will. The explosion radius and power need further testing, but it is estimated to be not weak. The more the analyst spoke, the more horrified Xiang Zuantang's expression became. He looked at Fana next to him with a weird expression. "Did you deal with this thing by yourself?" Hearing this, the tree gave him the feeling of a fortress, which was completely beyond the scope of a single agent's ability to deal with. This kind of thing should be handled by a special operations team with heavy weapons. For one person to deal with this source of infection, even if it was the Phantom, it would be a bit absurd, right? But Fana shook her head slightly, indicating that it was not her. An investigator next to her also came up and said, "No. It seems that the one who killed this tree-shaped source of infection was Batman." Batman? Hearing this, Xiang Zuantang's out of the blue expression suddenly disappeared, revealing an expression of "oh, that's okay. Anyway, I don't know when they have begun to accept this setting. Some people say that it is absurd to deal with this tree alone, but if you add that it was Batman, it seems that it is suddenly acceptable. So, the source of infection is this tree." Xiang Zuantang glanced at Leia, who was already handcuffed next to him, and that little girl, the culprit who spread the source of infection. "Is she just an ordinary person?" "Yes," the investigator next to him said, "but about the source of infection. She said someone gave it to her." "Someone gave it to her?" "Yes. She said someone gave her the seeds of the tree and asked her to plant them. Then the tree grew into this in a very short time, allowing her to infect other people instead of herself." Xiang Zuantang narrowed his eyes. "This problem is more serious than the source of infection itself." He walked in front of Leia. "Who gave you the seeds?" Leia raised her eyelids and glanced at him. "A man. I didn't see his face," she said coldly. "At that time, I was adopted by the Jordan couple's home, and he came to my house to find me. He showed his ID to the Jordan couple, saying that he was an official, and they should have seen my face. But the Jordan couple were already dead, and they were lying among the fallen infected people in the cave." However, Leia paused, glanced at Xiang Zuantang, and smiled teasingly. "He was wearing exactly the same clothes as you." Chapter 97. Good night. In fact, Batman did not leave immediately after crushing the strange tentacle tree. When the 9th Special Service arrived, he was still squatting in the bushes nearby and eavesdropping. Chu Cheng let Batman squat nearby and eavesdropped while he took the opportunity to catch his breath. He also went to the refrigerator to get a bottle of happy water and gulped down half a bottle in one breath. Another advantage of this game is that it is a sufficient amount of exercise and the energy is burned quickly. You don't have to worry about losing your figure if you drink less happy water. After playing the game for a while, Chu Cheng can clearly feel that the fat on his waist seems to have become less. Of course, the possibility of an illusion cannot be ruled out. He sat back in front of the screen and put on his headphones again, while eavesdropping on their conversation through Batman squatting in the back row on the screen. He drank happy water. During this time, he also took the time to send a message to his good brother Wei Futang on his mobile phone, which roughly meant asking his good brother to sign in for his class tomorrow. Tomorrow is Monday, and there are classes scheduled in the morning, but Huang Liping bought a high-speed rail ticket for tomorrow morning, and Chu Cheng is going to take her to the station. So I guess I have to skip tomorrow's class again and ask my good brother to punch in for me. There was no movement from my good brother for a while, and it didn't seem like he was going to reply to the message. However, according to Chu Cheng's recent understanding of him, he might be playing a first-person shooter game at this point. It's just that it's unknown whether he is standing, sitting, or lying down. Then he heard Rhea's last words from the headset. "He is wearing the same clothes as you," she said with a smile. This statement obviously had a great impact on the agents at the scene, and Chu Cheng was also a little surprised. On the surface, it seems that the person who gave Rhea several sources of infection and spread the source of infection is an agent of the 9th Special Service. Of course, it is impossible to assert with such a simple one-sided statement. First of all, the possibility that the girl deliberately lied cannot be ruled out. Secondly, even if what she said is true, it cannot directly explain the problem. The uniforms of the 9th Division are not so easy to get, but if someone really does it deliberately, it is not impossible to imitate them. Then no one has ever seen what the certificate Rhea mentioned looks like, and the possibility that it is forged cannot be ruled out. But if not, then we are back to the classic plot. There is a traitor in the asylum. Strangely enough, Chu Cheng, who learned of this possibility, was not surprised at all. He did not think, wow, there is a traitor, but wow, a traitor has only appeared now. The reason for this weird stereotype is that it seems that the Shield in the next universe has the fault. An organization that has been infiltrated by Hydra since its inception is really unique, and it is full of traitors from top to bottom. Of course, this is definitely not to say that the director of Shield, Lu Dan, is lame. On the contrary, he, a serious agent, can actually sit in the position of a chief agent in an organization that is full of traitors since its inception, and finally fight back and forth with his own traitors and finally get an extreme 1-for-1 result. At least Chu Cheng thinks that Lu Dan has handed in a Super Shen answer. It is estimated that the one who has dealt the most damage to Hydra in the past few decades is not Captain America or the Avengers, but Lu Dan, the chief agent among this group of traitors. Because Lu Dan embezzled tons of public funds, Hydra was fleeced by him and had no place to complain. However, if it was just a traitor at the level of Hydra, it wouldn't be a big problem. It's a miracle that this organization can last for decades before it's finished, because you just need to say long live Hydra in the ears of all Shield agents, and anyone who replies will be dragged out and shot, and this organization will explode on the spot. What a coincidence. Just after Rhea finished speaking, a group of agents were still surrounding her to ask questions, and suddenly everyone's mobile phone received a message, including Chu Cheng, who also received a message from the Special Service 9 app. It was a red attack alert that would only be issued under extraordinary circumstances. The Special Service 9's air carrier was invaded. Special Service 9's air carrier, a few minutes ago. Professor Miyazaki quickly typed on the floating keyboard to complete the final debugging of the device. At this time, on the desk in front of him was a head-mounted device, surrounded by cables. 4 or 5 monitors were turned on in parallel in front of him, and the screen was filled with a large number of readings and data curves. Ever since the last time the mysterious dream-making infected person caught the mobile team of the Special Service Section 9 off guard, the headquarters began to study a response plan. As the #1 authoritative researcher of the infected, Miyazaki Leozui was also given the position of the new project leader. This helmet device was developed for this purpose, but it was not entirely the responsibility of Leozui, but was jointly created by the equipment department and his department. Fortunately, Leozui had previously studied similar mental abilities to dream making, and proposed the design concept of a prototype, but it was never completed due to lack of data. This time, after the agents of the Special Service Section 9 came into contact with an enemy, who really had the ability to dream in actual combat, the data collected just happened to help Leozui complete the semi-finished product before. So they were able to build such a prototype in such a short time. In theory, this device can shield the influence of external forces on the wearer's brain dreams to a certain extent. At present, this demand has been roughly met, but the system is not stable and there is still the possibility of causing side effects to the wearer's brain, so he needs to continue debugging. Chen Miyu appeared at the door of the laboratory. "Is it done, Professor?" she asked. "Almost done." Professor Miyazaki did not even turn his head. He was now concentrating on his work, immersed in his own world, and did not care who came in. The dream shielding function should be realized, and the next step is to debug to reduce the impact of side effects. But I personally think it can be put into actual combat now. Although it may bear certain risks, if it is a special person, that risk is completely affordable. This is also the advantage of special people. Not only do they have a physique beyond that of ordinary people, but they also have more or less extraordinary self-healing abilities. In the process of opening the equipment, some side effects that may be dangerous to ordinary people may not be unbearable for special agents. Miyazaki Leozui actually proposed this theory a long time ago, believing that the special qualities of special people can be taken into account, including self-healing factors in the process of equipment development. However, this proposal was rejected by the superiors. "That's great." Chen Miyu walked into the laboratory. "I fell into a dream once. No matter who that person was, the dream he controlled was almost flawless. The scene looked exactly like the real thing, and the touch, smell, and even pain of things were also real, as if even the brain was trying to deceive you." She rubbed her temples, as if she still had a headache when she recalled that scene. "You know, after falling into that kind of thing, you will have a strong sense of powerlessness. The whole world is out of your control, and you are like being in the center of an endless vortex, falling continuously. I'm sure it must be uncomfortable." Professor Miyazaki answered absent-mindedly, still not stopping the debugging work. "But don't worry, the data you collected in the last encounter is crucial. Once the debugging is completed, the helmet will soon be put into mass production, and then we don't have to be afraid anymore." "Really?" Chen Miyu stopped a few steps behind Professor Miyazaki. Professor Miyazaki saw the strange and subtle smile on her face in the reflection of a glass. "So, Professor, how do you know that the work you are doing now, what you are experiencing, and even the equipment that is about to be completed are not dreams?" He finally stopped debugging and turned to look at Chen Miyu behind him. He narrowed his eyes. "What do you want to say, Agent Chen Miyu?" "Nothing." The next moment, Professor Miyazaki's pupils shrank and saw that Chen Miyu had taken out a silver-white pistol. The streamlined shape and the metallic shell reflected the bright luster, and the black muzzle seemed to be staring into the abyss. "Good night, Professor." She pulled the trigger. The gun went off. The firelight lit up from the dark muzzle like a flickering lotus. Professor Miyazaki felt a sharp pain in a very short moment, but it disappeared quickly, along with all other perceptions and the light of the whole world. He fell to the floor, but felt as if his body had lost weight. Everything was gradually swallowed up, and only the last two words lingered in his ears in the darkness. "Good night." Chapter 98, Invasion of the Grave. Boom. There was an explosion without any signs at all, and it sounded like the sound of a popcorn machine. Then the airborne carrier began to vibrate, as if someone had dropped a huge iron ball on the deck of a ship floating on the water. The sharp alarm sounded throughout the entire carrier in an instant, as if it was going to pierce everyone's eardrums. The command room was instantly in an uproar, and the image of Chairman Li Changcheng was projected on the screen of the command room. He had no expression on his face, and his tone was hurried and unquestionable. "What's the situation?" he asked coldly. "We are attacked." Someone in the command room answered, "There is a flying vehicle on the left wing of the ship. We are under attack." In fact, many people on the ship had already guessed that an enemy attack had occurred, but they still found it unbelievable to hear this. Because they were in the so-called safest place in the world, the security system was impregnable, let alone being approached by someone like this. Theoretically, the early warning system should have responded, even if it was tens of thousands of miles away. But the fact was that someone was attacking their face, and the radar of their carrier was dead, and it didn't even fire a single P. Li Changcheng had the idea of sending the security chief, who swore that everything was absolutely foolproof, to the border to plant potatoes. But the radar of their special service department was not made of paper after all. Even if they said there was a quality problem, it was too much to say that they were being bullied and there was no action. Unless their alarm system was lifted in advance. The third power room is on fire. Someone shouted, "If the fire continues to spread, it may cause the engine to overheat." Li Changcheng narrowed his eyes. He immediately began to dispatch personnel and arrange firefighting in the power room. No matter how urgent the situation is, saving the engine is the first priority. Otherwise, such a large tomb falling from a height of several thousand meters may not be a good scene. But before he could arrange and order, the second wave of impact followed. There was another explosion, and it was unknown which direction the ship came from. But everyone clearly felt that the ship shook, and then the picture on the big screen hanging in the command room blurred and went out with a snap. Li Changcheng's image disappeared from the screen. The huge black electronic screen reflected the mess in the command room like a chaotic mirror, like a silent mockery. The door panel on one side of the command room was blasted open by a strange force with a muffled sound, and the deformed metal door panel smashed an agent in the hall. The after image flashed in from behind the door. A person landed on all fours, with his limbs twisted like vines, and moved quickly in the command room like some kind of reptile. An infected person. Someone immediately pulled out a gun and shot at the infected person, but he was very fast and dodged the bullet that flew in front of him at the first time. The walls and consoles were crackling with sparks from the bullets, but most of the agents were also special people with enhanced bodies. Soon, an agent flew forward to block the infected person's way and fought with him. But then more infected people jumped in from the blown up entrance, and the command room suddenly became a mess. Infected people have landed on the mothership. Repeat, infected people have landed on the mothership. The communicator immediately issued an alert to all agents on the ship through the headset, but no one answered. The only thing that came from the channel was a creepy whisper, a bit like the sound of the night wind passing through the dark woods, and a bit like the whisper of ghosts, which made people's backs shiver. At the same time, more agents on the ship were trying to contact the command center, but they heard similar voices from the headsets. For example, Agent Felix Grove, who had just finished his routine report and was walking in the corridor of the mothership to catch the flight back to the ground. When the second vibration hit, he fell down because his feet were unstable, and the lights on the top of the corridor went out at the same moment. Soon, gunshots and fighting sounds were heard behind the corner in front. This made him feel not very good. Felix stood up in the dark. It took a little time for his eyes to adapt to the darkness so that he could barely see the outline of the corridor. He tried to contact the command room through the headset to be alert, but only the disturbing whisper came. The sound of fighting in front of him stopped, and he didn't know what happened. He swallowed his saliva and tried to calm himself down. At the same time, he took out his pistol, turned off the safety, and walked cautiously along the dark corridor. He felt a cool breeze blowing on the back of his neck from a close distance. Felix froze and turned his head quickly, his eyes reflecting the distorted shadow in horror. The woman was hanging upside down on the ceiling of the corridor, with long hair hanging down, and a strange long snake-like tongue sticking out of her mouth, looking at him with a chilling look. Over there, a team of agents passed through the narrow corridor and rushed to the location where the first explosion hit. The mothership was blown out of a gap from that direction, and an unidentified aircraft approached that location. Many infected people landed on the mothership from that gap. The gap was also near the power room, and the fire caused by the explosion was threatening one of the engines of their mothership. Although the engine can still operate for the time being, no one knows what the consequences will be if it is delayed for a long time. The agents kept the highest vigilance while moving at full speed. They had learned that infected people had landed on the mothership from the aircraft, which meant that they would inevitably encounter a large number of infected people on the way to the power room, and an encounter was inevitable. They had thought so, and were ready for battle, but the reality was different from what they thought. But when the agents approached the gap, they did not encounter the grotesque and distorted infected people as expected. On the contrary, there was only one person at the other end of the passage, who not only looked normal, but even a little elegant. He was wearing a sophisticated tuxedo, and looked like he was preparing to attend a banquet instead of an invasion. He held a cane in his hand, and wore a mask with a pattern that looked like a hypnotic vortex on his face. He looked unhurried and walked towards them slowly with a crutch. Although he looked harmless, the agents did not hesitate at all. The moment they saw this person, they immediately raised their guns and pulled the trigger. The sound of the gun was reflected back and forth in the closed corridor and superimposed to one place, becoming deafening. Among them, there were not only the conventional pistols, but also more powerful rifles and shotguns that were particularly useful in such narrow and confined spaces. But none of them worked. Everyone saw that the bullets slowed down rapidly when approaching the masked man's figure, and turned to the sides when approaching him, as if they were deliberately avoiding the man's body, as if they were afraid of him. The masked man paused under the astonished gaze of everyone, and gently turned his cane half a circle in his palm, and then slammed it on the floor. A transparent impact erupted, as if an invisible whirlwind had drawn the agents into an invisible vortex. They first felt the disappearance of gravity, and their bodies were suspended in the air uncontrollably, and then everything around them began to fall apart. The metal plates on the walls and the ground were easily torn apart like paper, and the entire passage began to collapse at a speed visible to the naked eye. The entire area of the mothership seemed to be instantly dismantled into a sky of metal parts by a pair of invisible hands. The ground they were standing on was also sucked away, and along with the broken and shattered parts, they began to dive towards the ground thousands of meters away. The long fall was like Lucifer's fall from heaven for 9 days and 9 nights. The masked man continued to move forward calmly, as if this ship was his own backyard, and he was just taking a leisurely stroll after dinner. Not long after walking, Chen Miao appeared in front of him. "Did you get the stuff?" the masked man asked. On the way, Chen Miao took out a small card. It was Professor Miyazaki's ID card, and waved it in front of him. "It will take some time. You'd better keep them busy." "Of course." The masked man waved his cane lightly. "It's a piece of cake." Chapter 99 Unscientific Night. The masked man walked slowly through the metal corridor, through one room after another, and walked through the huge ship, as if he was in an empty space. He believed that dreams were a magical thing. They were invisible and intangible, but they really existed. They took out a lot of fragments from memories, extracted the essence, and created scenes that seemed real. It is the most cunning thing in the world. You try to catch it, and it slips away like water. You look at it directly, and try to open your eyes wide, but every time you finally think you have seen its essence, you always find that it has become something else. That's why it is invincible. The masked man came to the door of the command room. He stood outside the door, smiled and whispered, "Open sesame." As if a magical spell connected the electronic data, the metal door panel opened along the slide rail with a clatter. The man turned his cane lightly on the cane, and walked in with big strides. Because it is a dream, everything is possible. He is the master of dreams, he is a dream walker, and the world will obey his orders. At this time, the infected who invaded the command room have been almost eliminated. After all, the agents here are all special agents, and some of them are outstanding, so they are not likely to be taken over by a few infected people. The last infected person was shot in the head, and his body fell down from a metal aisle, and lay on the ground motionless. The agents who finished the battle immediately returned to their respective posts, and tried to restore the communication and dispatch the overall situation. The most important thing is to regain contact with the chairman. After the screen went out, Li Changcheng's image disappeared from the screen, and then the infected invaded the mothership. No one knows where he is on the ship now. Maybe he is now surrounded. Someone immediately discovered the abnormality of the command room system. Entrance number 3 of the command room is open. The command room should have been locked as soon as the intrusion was discovered, and all entrances should have been closed. Everyone looked in the direction of entrance number 3. Then they noticed the Dreamwalker. Intruder. Someone shot at him, but the bullet miraculously turned in the air and turned around to knock another agent on the side to the ground. So no one dared to shoot casually. An agent immediately jumped down from the bridge and tried to arrest him, but he didn't expect that the metal railing behind him suddenly twisted as soon as he jumped into the air, locking his body like a steel rope in an extremely strange state. No matter how he struggled to break free, he couldn't move at all. Another person was entangled in the ankles of wires that suddenly pierced from the ceiling. When he rushed halfway, the colorful cables quickly contracted and dragged the agent into the air and hung upside down on the ceiling. Another agent almost rushed to the front and found that the man's figure disappeared in an instant. When he turned around in shock, he found that all the agents in the bridge had turned into the masked man. The masked men on the bridge snapped their fingers together and the floor under the agent's feet suddenly disappeared. He immediately screamed and fell from the sky. Everyone calmed down. An agent shouted, "Intelligence shows that the enemy's ability is to create dreams, which are all false illusions." Before he finished speaking, the windshield behind him suddenly exploded. It was as if an invisible hand had dragged him and several agents beside him out of the cabin without explanation, and they also joined the ranks of free fall. Maybe. Dreamwalker chuckled, but who can tell the boundary between dreams and reality? Physically speaking, it might indeed be a dream, an illusion in objective reality, but that kind of completely real vision and touch. Everything is visible and tangible, and people trapped in it are like being trapped in a vortex fabricated by the name of reality, and it is impossible to find the direction to land. He leaned his cane on the ground, looked around, and couldn't find the person he was looking for. He couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Well, the chairman is not here. What a pity. I thought I could take the opportunity to chat. What a pity. Clang. As soon as the voice fell, a piece of windshield suddenly broke. A white figure fell from the sky with a cloak like a crescent moon and kicked at Dreamwalker with his feet together. Dreamwalker's pupils shrank. He was the only one in the room who knew clearly that the images of the cabins breaking just now were all illusions, and only this one was real. There really was such a person who smashed the windshield of the mothership from outside and kicked it in. It was thousands of meters in the air. Even the moment Dreamwalker realized this, the first thought that popped into his mind was that this was fucking unscientific. He almost instinctively held his cane horizontally and blocked it in front of him with both hands. The white combat boots kicked the cane powerfully in the air. Dreamwalker could feel that the bones in his arm were almost broken. The vibration caused by the strong impact began to spread from his arm to his whole body, and his bones seemed to be buzzing. His back hit a screen hanging on the wall a few meters away and fell to the ground together with the screen. The monitor broke with a crisp wail. Several cables were exposed and glass fragments pierced his skin. Moonlight Knight half crouched and landed in the middle of the room. He slowly stood up, like a knight of judgment. All the agents looked at him, and they were confused for a while. At this time, the agents of the 9th Special Service Division who were present knew that they had fallen into a dream, and this dream was controlled by the masked man who deserved a beating. Theoretically, all the unscientific and unreasonable images they saw should be illusions operated by that man. But according to this logic, since it was a dream operated by him, there was no reason for him to fabricate a picture of himself being beaten up, right? But if this was not an illusion but real, then wouldn't it be true that there was such a guy wrapped like a mummy in the air thousands of meters and smashed the windshield of the mothership and kicked in? The agents were confused and couldn't tell whether it was a dream or reality. Moonlight Knight did have the ability to fly when the moon goddess's protection was in place, but this was an after-sales service and was not in his regular ability configuration list. Then Shu Cheng, the Moonlight Knight drawn from the sea level pool, naturally could not fly, so he didn't really control the Moonlight Knight to soar thousands of meters and land in the sky grave. Batman was responsible for locking the positions of the 9 motherships and tracking them. He flew the bat fighter all the way into the air, switched roles in the sky to become Moon Knight, and then kicked in with a night kick. When he landed, he also had a superhero landing look, which was very fashionable. Then he reproduced the scene that he had seen last night. This Dreamwalker seemed to be unconvinced. He had tried his dream ability once last night, and it was ineffective against the Moon Knight with the buff, but he wanted to try it again. So the agents in the command room watched a blockbuster level decisive battle from the front row VIP seats. As soon as the Dreamwalker raised his cane, the floor of the command room rolled back, and countless hanging screens surrounded Moon Knight like a kaleidoscope. The cables jumping out of the walls and ceilings were sparking with dazzling electric sparks like venomous snakes. However, it was all useless. Moonlight Knight ignored all the fancy special effects and threw a simple left hook, which knocked the Dreamwalker unconscious and almost made him lose his balance. But he was still mumbling something while being beaten. You must feel that you have cracked the secret of dreams and that you have seen the essence of dreams. He couldn't finish the second half of the sentence because he was hit hard by a knee in the lower abdomen, which almost shattered his internal organs. The Dreamwalker's back hit the metal wall heavily, and he looked embarrassed but still chuckled. You underestimate dreams, he said in a weird tone. What you are fighting now is just the nightmare I created. But, what if it is your own nightmare? The average subscription has exceeded 3,500. Add more chapters to continue to ask for monthly tickets and follow-up subscriptions. Chapter 100. What about my nightmare? Even within the Death Soldier, few people know that the Dreamwalker's ability actually has more than one use. His regular ability, as shown before, is to create a dream realm that is completely dominated by him. He is invincible in the realm, rewriting the laws and overturning the world. Anyone who falls into the dream can only be manipulated by him. But this realm was born from the Dreamwalker's own brain. It is equivalent to him building a room in his mind and forcibly dragging all the players in the nearby area into his self-built room through the local area network. Here he is the absolute GM and the creator. Others cannot resist or log off the line to escape and can only let him manipulate them. Of course, this trick has been proven to be ineffective against Moonlight Knight, so he switched to another trick. There is a saying that, if the mountain doesn't come to me, I will go over it. Since he can't drag this white freak into his dream, then he will take the initiative to invade the other party's dream. Everyone has a nightmare in their heart, the illusion created by their deepest fear, the nightmare that everyone dares not face and is afraid of being drowned in. Dreamwalker is best at discovering these. He found the nightmare in the darkest corner of someone's mind that was intentionally hidden, and then forced the other person to reincarnate and relive it countless times until he collapsed. And he enjoyed this process. As soon as he entered the interior of the White Knight, he immediately smelled a delightful smell. The Dreamwalker, who had seen countless nightmares, was very familiar with this smell. He felt a fear from the bottom of the Moonlight Knight's heart that was 100 times stronger than that of others, the kind of extreme nightmare that ordinary people could hardly imagine. The entire life of Moonlight Knight Mark Spector was almost lived in a nightmare that he could never wake up from. His negligence as a child killed his own brother. While he was almost desperately blaming himself, he did not get comfort from his family. Instead, he was hated and blamed by his biological mother and grew up under his mother's abuse. Then he joined the army and became a mercenary, experiencing countless physical and psychological double pains with countless blood on his hands. Even after his death, he was brought back from the underworld by the moon god to work, carrying countless sins and curses like a star of damnation. The Dreamwalker was fascinated by this smell. This was the ultimate nightmare that he had rarely seen in his life. He could hardly imagine that there was any mind that could breed such a nightmare. A normal person would have gone crazy under such long-term torture. However, the moment before he was about to trigger that nightmare, the scene suddenly changed. The huge pain disappeared in an instant, as if the dark clouds in the sky were suddenly torn into pieces. All those pains and the curse of blood disappeared completely in an instant. The next second, the hellish nightmare just now suddenly turned into forgetting to bring homework to class, being punished by the teacher, being pranked by naughty children, not being able to find a job, and having to work overtime after finding a job. Dreamwalker? No, what about my extreme nightmare just now? What about such a big nightmare? Then he felt someone tapping his shoulder from behind. What the hell? As soon as he turned his head, he saw a man wearing a hood and a white suit appeared behind him. Without saying a word, he hit him in the face with a stick. The hit made Dreamwalker's head buzz, and he was also confused. Wait, am I not in a dream? He had invaded countless dreams before, and he was always the absolute master in dreams. This was the first time he was counter-ganked in the dream realm. Hasn't anyone told you that it's rude to peek into other people's dreams? The Moon Knight in the white suit snorted. This was Moon Knight's second personality, Stephen Grant, who was relatively talkative among the three personalities. Chu Cheng had just pressed the personality switch button. Immediately before the Dreamwalker could stand firm, another hand reached out from behind and pulled him over, followed by a fist that hit him in the face, knocking him down again. This time it was Moon Knight's main personality, Mark Spector. Chu Cheng was also surprised to find that he could actually operate two characters at the same time. Or to be more precise, he could use the personality switch button to switch between the two personalities, and the personality that was not controlled by him was suspected to be automatically controlled by AI and could even cooperate with him in combos. It was probably because this was Moon Knight's dream, and he could only do it in his own spiritual world. This Dreamwalker was really brave. He rushed into Moon Knight's dream without even thinking about it. The spirit was Moon Knight's forte, and even if he didn't have the spiritual attribute, you would never want to rush into the mind of a person with severe identity disorder. So the two Moon Knights went up and fought a doubles match. The Dreamwalker was beaten while shuttling between various weird scenes. The surrounding scenes kept changing from the city to the desert to the school to the battlefield, as if he was shuttling back and forth between two completely different lives. The Dreamwalker was puzzled. First of all, he was surprised that the other party could actually fight back like this in the dream realm. Ordinary people should have no ability to fight back against him in dreams. Secondly, there was another huge question in his mind. Why can this person sing a double act in the dream? Everyone's spiritual world has only one self, and he has invaded so many dreams without exception. So if this guy in the white cloak is his self, then who is the old KFC man next to him? If the old KFC man is the real body, then what about this cloaked man? The Dreamwalker's brain is getting more and more confused. The rapid changes between the scenes gave him a splitting headache, as if his soul was being torn in half. He simply couldn't imagine how this white-clothed weirdo could normally endure such a chaotic nightmare. But it wasn't over yet. He was kicked in the chest by the Moonlight Knight of Mark's personality and rolled back twice in embarrassment. When he stood up, he was shocked to find that he was actually in a pile of skeletons. The battlefield was devastated, and under his feet was a pile of corpses made of skeletons. A pair of black eye sockets seemed to be staring at him, as if they wanted to swallow him. Unprecedented fear swept through the Dreamwalker's body. He hurriedly tried to pull away, but found that a pale hand stretched out from the pile of skeletons, and the White Knight like a mummy crawled out of the pile of corpses. The face under the hood was pitch black, and looking at him was like staring into an endless abyss. The world spun again, the scene changed, and they returned to the mothership's command room. The agents in the command room only saw a brief standoff between Dreamwalker and Moonlight Knight. After a pause, Dreamwalker suddenly let out a strange cry and retreated repeatedly, as if he had seen a ghost. It was unknown what stimulated him. Impossible, this is not your dream. What's going on? Although he retreated in time, Dreamwalker's brain still had a splitting headache. He had begun to reflect on whether invading this freak's dream was the worst decision he had ever made in his life. Fortunately, he withdrew quickly enough. If he stayed in that dream for a little longer, he would not know what he would become. He suddenly froze. As if he was electrocuted, Dreamwalker's eyes under the mask widened with extreme shock and fear, and his pupils reflected a scene that he had never seen before, even in the most terrifying dream he created. A giant-like body rose from the ground, with the sky above his head. The body, dozens or hundreds of meters high, was wrapped in a huge robe woven like a shroud. There was no neck, only a vulture-like head hanging in the air at the neck. The sky turned completely black, and endless stars dotted the night sky. A new moon hung in the sky, and the bright moonlight shone down. Moonlight Knight stood on the bridge, his figure bathed in the moonlight, his cloak fluttering without wind, and the human-shaped giant bird stood behind him. Dreamwalker was almost stunned. He quickly realized from the awe-inspired gazes of the other agents in the command room that others could see the giant shadow just like him. No, impossible. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.